Chen Daoxian belonged to a crooked road in the past, and now he wants to forcibly reverse it. The price he pays must be much more difficult than someone who has never set foot on the road of Kendo. But fortunately, to understand the sword intent, the most important thing is comprehension. And what Chen Daoxian lacked the most was comprehension. In the sea of knowledge, the comprehension stars like giant celestial bodies slowly rotate, and as the comprehension stars rotate, traces of dust-like matter detach and disappear from the comprehension stars little by little. With the consumption of comprehension stars, Chen Daoxian's comprehension also skyrocketed. Chen Daoxian found that since the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic broke through to the third layer, not only has a function of Dao extension, but also the function of enlightenment has changed again. On the second level of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, there is an additional preaching function, and the enlightenment function has changed from 10 times the original understanding to 30 times the understanding, a huge improvement. On the third level of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, Chen Daoxian's enlightenment function is no longer limited to how many times his comprehension. He found that his comprehension can be adjusted and controlled at will. Theoretically, there is no upper limit to how many times you want to have comprehension. But as the comprehension multiplier increases, the consumption of comprehension stars will also increase sharply. Chen Daoxian has tried it, and once he uses more than 100 times his savvy, this savvy star with a diameter of hundreds of miles will be consumed at a terrifying speed. To consume 100 times of comprehension, he estimated that in 3 days at most, this comprehension star formed by absorbing a large amount of chaotic energy from the true immortal origin realm will be exhausted. And if the comprehension used is less than 100 times, the speed of consuming the comprehension stars will suddenly decrease, and there is no change at all. At the moment, Chen Daoxian doubled his comprehension, which just reached 101 times, because he found that when his comprehension exceeded 100 times, he seemed to have entered an indescribable special state. The barriers that were difficult to comprehend and understand in the past have become simple and easy to understand in an instant with the blessing of more than 100 times of comprehension. It's like his silk rain sword intent. As a branch of sword intent of water traveling, once a cultivator sets foot on sword intent of silk rain, and then wants to embark on sword intent of water traveling, the price to be paid will be too great. According to the records of the Chenyuan sword sect classics, if you want to switch from the branches of sword intent, such as Siyu sword intent, extreme cold sword intent, etc., to the path of water traveling sword intent, you need to comprehend several branches of sword intent, and comprehend them into extremely high realm. Then, on the basis of these several branches of water-moving sword intentions, we can only comprehend the water-moving sword intention by integrating them into one. This method, just by the sound of it, makes the scalp feel numb. Chen Daoxian also planned to use this method to reverse his Siyu sword intent, but after his comprehension exceeded 100 times, he found that he didn't need such trouble. He was able to peep through the silk rain sword intent of the Taoist realm, and peep a trace of the sword intent of the water in the same realm. For other cultivators, it was like a fantasy, but for Chen Daoxian, who was now 100 times more savvy, it was as easy as he could. On the star's kendo map, with the violent beating of the stars transformed by the Siyu sword intent, the originally light blue Siyu sword intent stars finally transformed into a clear water blue. Water moves sword intent. It's done. In the quiet room, Chen Daoxian suddenly opened his eyes, his face full of surprise. In the sea of Dantian gas, the star kendo map covers the top. On the star map, a bright space star like a diamond version stands in the center, and next to the space star is a water-blue water star. These two stars are not only transformed by the law of space and the sword intent of the water movement, but also transformed by the shadow-bearing sword and the flying snow sword. Seeing that Shui Xing's sword intent was completed, Chen Daoxian was overjoyed and spit out. He saw a water-blue star spit out by him. As soon as the water-blue star appeared, it turned into a light blue flying sword and slowly revolved around Chen Daoxian. Looking at the Feishua sword that had been with him at the beginning of his cultivation path, Chen Daoxian couldn't help but gently stroked its blade. After Feishuajin was integrated into Chen Daoxian's thoughts, his spirituality soared again. Even if Chen Daoxian did not take the initiative to control it with his thoughts, it could make the most suitable response to Chen Daoxuan's thoughts according to Chen Daoxuan's thoughts. The so-called heart-to-heart, but that's it. After appeasing Fi Xuejin, Chen Daoxian took out a jade bottle from the storage ring, which was the jade bottle containing 67 drops of the power of creation. To promote the Siyu sword intent to the Siyu law was Chen Daoxuan's idea at the very beginning. But before the implementation, Chen Daoxian wondered if he could transform the Siyu sword intent into the water-traveling sword intent with a broader path and greater potential. If it were another cultivator, it would be even more difficult to comprehend the sword intent of water traveling if one wanted to reverse the sword intent of Siyu into sword intent of water in a short period of time. With the fusion of these two flying swords with the law of space and the law of water movement, the sword bodies of the Qingying sword and the flying snow sword also began to undergo different changes. In the past, the body of the Feishua sword was silver-white, while the Qingying sword was silver-gray. But now, the flying snow sword has turned into light blue, and the Qingying sword has turned into a transparent color like a diamond. Chen Daoxian knew that after the immortal sword was integrated into the law gradually changed the physical properties of the flying sword. The domineering of the star's kendo map lies in this: the relationship between the law and the immortal sword is mutual influence and mutual promotion. Since the two have merged into one, it has become this relationship. Even Chen Daoxian noticed that after the water movement sword intent was transformed into the water movement law, the star sword map began to strengthen again. The magnitude of this enhancement is not as strong as the transformation of the space sword intent into the space law, but it has at least increased by about a quarter. Sure enough, the more and stronger the laws of Xingqian Kendo diagram, the stronger it will continue to become. Diagram raising swords, sword raising diagrams, that's what it means. Chen Daoxian said silently. The next moment, he displayed the two-yield sword formation, and wanted to use the power of the formation to once again integrate the laws of space and water movement. Before, Chen Daoxian tried to fuse them with the sword array of two instruments after his mind was integrated into the Siyu sword intent and the law of space. However, the gap between the Siyu sword intent and the space law is too great. Even if there is a mind and two sword formations, and the two can be forcibly integrated into one, the increase that can be brought is extremely limited. Although Chen Daoxian didn't know how strong the high-level realm of the space law after comprehending the space strangulation, the two sword formations combined the space law and the silk rain sword intent, at most, only increased the power of the middle space law by 30%. This increase does have a reputation for the fusion of negative laws and the soaring power. Among them, there is a reason why the degree of integration is not deep enough, but Chen Daoxian feels that the bigger factor is that the gap between silk rain sword intent and space law is too large. The two, one as bright as the scorching sun, and the other as small as a star, are not at the same level at all. Forcibly integrating them can increase their power by 30%, which is already a burning incense. This is also the reason why Chen Daoxian did not use the Liangyi sword formation immediately when he faced the enemy Minghuang Zhenjuan. The middle section of the law of space has increased its power by 30%, and it is still too far to compete with the monks in the late stage of nascent soul and the high section of the law of fire. Not to mention that true monarch Minghuang is physically strong, at least 2 realms higher than Chen Daoxuan's body refinement. Under various considerations, Chen Daoxian directly broke out his strongest trump card, Xingqian Kendo map. It was this determination that saved his life. Otherwise, if he really uses the space law in the middle section of the law realm, plus the 2 sword formations formed by the combination of the silk rain sword intent in the high section of the Dao realm, he will fight against true monarch Minghuang recklessly. I am afraid that Chen Daoxian will be smashed into powder by the iron fist of Minghuang Zhenjuan. Because the realm of Chen Daoxuan's avenue is not much worse than that of true monarch Minghuang, but the basic cultivation base of the two sides is too different, and being beaten to death with one punch is already a more euphemism. Quiet indoors. The law of space and the law of water movement, under the link of the 2 swords, gradually merge into one. The water blue fairy sword and the transparent fairy sword are constantly rotating and fused, and the law of space and the law of water movement are madly entangled together. Chen Daoxian felt that, compared to the giant axe he saw in the true immortal origin realm, although his behavior of the fusion law was tricky, the effect was not bad. The only difference is that his formation power is not strong enough, and the number of laws and realm is not enough. The power of the formation is not strong, but his formation realm is limited, and the number and realm of the laws are not enough, which means that he has limited access to enlightenment. But these are things that can be improved in the future, and Chen Daoxian is not in a hurry. Is this the result of the fusion of the law of space and the law of water movement by the two sword formations? Looking at the two swords in front of them that were completely integrated into one, exuding a terrifying power, Chen Daoxian's heart trembled. In front of him, this peculiar immortal sword was quietly suspended. On the immortal sword, two laws were entangled, fused, separated, and entangled, showing an extremely unstable state. Around the fairy sword, the space was like a rag, torn into pitch-black holes. You must know that the space in the quiet room at the moment is reinforced and suppressed by the star kendo map, and it is not comparable to the space that is not reinforced outside. Even so, the space was easily twisted to pieces. Seeing this scene, Chen Daoxian did not dare to continue trying, and quickly removed the bond of the power of the formation. With the withdrawal of the two swords, the law of space and the law of water movement are like two mutually exclusive magnets, directly separated. Ha! If this sword goes down, the original true monarch Ming Huang can't bear it, right? Chen Daoxian stroked the two blue and transparent fairy swords and muttered. 7017K. Chapter 328, Squeak, push open the door of the quiet room and withdraw the protective formation. The dazzling sunlight shone on Chen Daoxian's handsome face, causing him to narrow his eyes slightly. With his consciousness swept away, Chen Daoxian discerned the direction, his figure blurred for a while, and instantly disappeared in place. Inside a hall, Wan Xinghai cultivator gathered together with a serious look. In the main hall, not only the 7 Jindan real people with the highest cultivation level are present, but also the actual power generals in the various armies are also present. Suddenly, Chen Daoxian's figure appeared in the hall, causing a whole exclamation. Chen Jinren! Chen Jinren is here! As soon as Chen Daoxian appeared, the greetings came one after another, showing how high his status was in the minds of the Jinan army cultivators. Fairy Qi Yao, who was sitting on the main seat, saw Chen Daoxian and immediately stood up. Her pretty face was full of surprise. Fellow Daoist Chen, you're out of the border. Chen Daoxian bowed his hands to everyone with a smile, and finally fixed his eyes on Fairy Qi Yao, and said with a smile, I just came out of the customs, and I met you guys discussing matters. What happened in the past few days? Hearing this, Fairy Qi Yao's smile on her pretty face subsided, she nodded solemnly and said, something really happened. Oh? Chen Daoxian raised his brows slightly. It is thousands of miles away from Zhenengguan. Qingwei Taoist sect. It is different from Chenyuan Jianzong sect standing on the island, surrounded by large and small defensive formations built by cave worlds. The sects of the Qingwei Taoist sect stand among the continuous mountains. Overlooking from a high altitude, the sect of the Qingwei Taoist sect is surrounded by 9 immortal veins. After hundreds of thousands of years of blessings from the ancestors of the past dynasties, countless immortal veins have been arranged by the monks of the Qingwei Taoist sect. Defense formation. In terms of defensive power, the defensive formation of the Qingwei Taoist faction is only above the Chenyuan Sword sect's guardian formation. Qingwei Taoism, on a vast immortal pond like the sea, one after another silhouette sitting in the misty water vapor. If you look closely, you will find that the power emanating from these figures has all reached the nascent soul stage. Boom! A monstrous wave surged out from the depths of the fairy pond. A man wearing a silver-white Taoist robe with a somewhat feminine face suddenly opened his eyes. As the feminine man opened his eyes, the rest of the crowd were alarmed, and one after another, Yuaning-level consciousness came over. Metropolitan. The feminine man raised his head, looked in the direction of Izumo, and frowned. Scarlet Jiaozhen is dead. What? Impossible. True monarch Qi Jiao is the top true monarch, who could kill him? Could it be that primordial spirit Dao Jun took action? All of a sudden, the people guarding Tai Immortal Pond opened their eyes one after another and couldn't sit still any longer. True Monarch Scarlet Flood Dragon is one of the top true monarchs in the Qingwei Taoist faction, ranking very high in strength. Compared to Ming Huang and his likes, True Monarch Scarlet Flood Dragon is much stronger. Now everyone suddenly heard that True Monarch Scarlet Flood had fallen, no less than Qianyuan Jianzong had fallen to a powerhouse at the level of a palace master. How could the sect not be shaken? This is a big event that affects the foundation of the sect. Seeing everyone's questioning, the feminine man's face was even more ugly, and he said solemnly, "It was Lingwu Zhenjuan and Qianyuan Jianzong Shadow Hall's hall master who took action personally. Lingwu Zhenjuan personally led the army to attack the Scarlet Flood Dragon Immortal City. Mean. The shameless special of Qianyuan Jianzong. The two beasts, Lin Wu and the palace master of the Shadow Palace." For a time, the many nascent soul true monarchs on the Tai Immortal Pond were filled with righteous indignation. Although most people were very angry when they heard the news, there were also calm people who frowned and thought, "Sect Master, Lingwu Zhenjuan has been stationed in Lingwu Xianqing for hundreds of years, and he has always confronted my Xianqing Dao League, and has never attacked in a big way. Will they suddenly attack so aggressively?" The gentle-tempered Qingwei Taoist sect master pondered for a moment, then nodded and said, "Elder Yun's consideration is reasonable. Although Qianyuan Jianzong and my Xianqing Taoist League have been fighting for hundreds of years, the Yuanying level war has never broken out for a few years. The field, let alone the top true monarch himself. The news of Tai Shinshui in our sect must have been leaked. This." Everyone looked at each other, not knowing what to do. The meaning of the Qingwei Taoist sect master is very clear. There are ghosts in the sect, and they are among the people present. These words undoubtedly made everyone look at each other's eyes with a slight change. At this time, a late nascent soul cultivator stood up and cupped his hands. "Sect Master, everyone, now is not the time to look for spies from the sect. The Scarlet Flood Immortal City is the biggest gate built by my Xianqing Dao Alliance in Izumo. Once the Crimson Flood Immortal City is destroyed, the Qianyuan Sword Sect's army can freely attack the small immortal cities stationed by my Qingwei Taoist faction." Elder, he is right. The most important thing right now is to block true monarch Lingwu. Just as everyone was arguing, another message came over. Seeing this, everyone turned their attention to the sect master of Qingwei Taoism. The gentle-faced Qingwei Taoist sect master took out the communication jade talisman in front of everyone. But then, his complexion became ashen. "Metropolitan." Seeing the face of their sect master, everyone had a bad premonition in their hearts. Zenangwen was broken, and true monarch Minghuang died in battle. Within a day, the news of the death of the two true monarchs was sent back to the sect, causing the entire Qingwei Taoist sect to be enveloped in a slaughter. Next moment, the sect master of the Qingwei Taoist sect stood up directly and ordered, "Pass my decree, order, all the nascent soul true sovereigns in the sect gather here, and rush out to the great immortal cities of the Cloud Country." Hearing this order, almost all true monarch nascent soul bowed their hands solemnly, "Abide by the decree of the sect master." After a stick of incense, one after another escaping light, or driving a spirit boat, or alone, flew out of the Qingwei Taoist defense formation, and flew in the direction of Izumo. With the help of Yuanying Zhenjuan left. The Yuanying Zhenjuan who stayed above the Tai Immortal Pond suddenly decreased by 90%. Metropolitan. The elder Yun surnamed Yun glanced at the sect master of Qingwei Taoism, bowed slightly, and said hesitantly, "Could this be Qianyuan Jianzong's plan to move tigers away from mountains?" The sect master of the Qingwei Taoist sect nodded. "Elder Yun's concerns, this seat has also thought about it, but the immortal city of the Izumo country must not be lost." He turned to look at the elder Yun. "Although Tai Shinshui has the effect of helping Yuanying cultivators to break through the Yuanshan stage, it is not absolute. If my Qingwei Taoist sect puts all bets on this treasure. Once Izumo was lost, Qianyuan Jianzong invaded our homeland, and I failed to break through the Yuanshan stage. Have you ever thought about the situation of my Qingwei Taoist school?" This. Elder Yun frowned, and after a while, he nodded. "The sect master is thinking about it, but the old man is worried that Qianyuan Jianzong will send someone to raid my sect?" Assault? The sect master of the Qingwei Taoist sect suddenly showed a confident look on his face, and said with a smile, I really hope that Qianyuan Jianzong will really dare to send someone to take the opportunity to attack us. Heard. Elder Yun glanced at the unfathomable sect master, and immediately stopped talking. In any case, even if the Qingwei Taoist faction sent nearly 100 Yuanying true monarchs, there are still more than 10 Yuanying true monarchs in the sect at this moment guarding the Tai Immortal Pond, including the suzerain himself. Coupled with the Qingwei Taoist sect's guardian formation, Qianyuan Jianzong wants to send people to attack. At least dozens of Yuanying Jinjuan must be sent to attack together, and there is a glimmer of hope to break through the Qingwei Taoist sect. And now, how could the Qianyuan sword sect still have dozens of Yuanying-level combat power? The Xianqing Dao League did not dare to say that they knew all the information about the true Emperor Yuanying of the Qianyuan sword sect, but they knew the approximate number. Don't look at the more than 100 Yuanying Jinjuan in Qianyuan Jianzong. But at the same time, the territory of Qianyuan sword sect is also very vast. Wan Xinghai has to leave a part of Yuanying Jinjuan to guard, and the real Demon World Channel also needs to leave Yuanying Jinjuan to guard. And at this moment, the Qianyuan sword sect attacked Izumo with all their strength, and most of their nascent soul's combat power was probably transferred to the front line of Izumo. In addition, the sect of Qianyuan Jianzong always has to leave a few Yuanying monks to guard. After all, how could Qianyuan Jianzong still draw dozens of Yuanying monks to attack the Qingwei Daoist faction? And sending a few nascent soul true monarchs here, even if they are top true monarchs, is no different from sending them to death, and the Qingwei Taoist faction is naturally not afraid. Not to mention that the sect master of the Qingwei Taoist sect is astonishingly powerful. With him sitting in the sect, he can protect the sect and Tai Shinshui. Having said that, the sect master of the Qingwei Taoist sect still ordered, Elder He. Subordinates are here. Let your people check carefully the movements of all the Yuanying monks in Qianyuan Jianzong in the near future. This, subordinates obey. The elder surnamed He bowed to his orders. Seeing that Elder He was about to leave, the sect master of the Qingwei Taoist sect said again, also, remember to let your people bring some trouble to the base camp of Qianyuan sword sect. Elder He touched the eyes of the sect master in front of him, his heart trembled, and immediately nodded, yes, sect master. Zenangwen. Inside the hall. After Chen Daoxian listened to Fairy Qiyao's narration, a storm surged in his heart. You mean Qianyuan Jianzong attacked Izumo in an all-round way? Fairy Qiyao nodded. Not only that, Lingwu Jinjuan has already captured Qijiao Xiancheng. Hearing this news, Chen Daoxian was shocked. Scarlet Flood Immortal City, but the Immortal City where Scarlet Flood Immortal Lord sits, as the top true monarch of the Xianqing Dao League, the status of Scarlet Flood Dragon True Monarch is like the master of the seven halls of Qianyuan Sword Sect. A true monarch of this level has actually fallen. Although Chen Daoxian didn't know how Qianyuan Jianzong did it, it was clear that Qianyuan Jianzong was determined to attack Izumo with all his strength. As for the purpose of Qianyuan Jianzong doing this, everyone present was unclear, but Chen Daoxian had a vague guess. Probably, to create opportunities for the Lord of Jinhai Palace. However, with the power of the Jinhai Palace Hall Master alone, can he break through the Qingwei Taoist sect with a large number of nascent soul true monarchs in charge? No matter how you look at it, it's a bit like courting death. However, Chen Daoxian couldn't help but think that once the Tai Shinshui was conceived, a Yuanchen Daojun was born in the Xianqing Dao League, and the Qianyuan sword sect was also a dead end. The difference between early death and late death, it is no wonder that Qianyuan Jianzong is desperate. Is Sect Master Concubine so confident in the strength of Palace Master Qin? Chen Daoxian said secretly. Immediately, his heart sank. No, Qianyuan Jianzong must not fall, at least not now. As a traveler, Chen Daoxian's loyalty to Qianyuan Jianzong is almost zero. But the Chen family took root in Wangxinghai after all. Once the war broke out in Wangxinghai, the Chen family would definitely not be able to survive alone. Thinking of his record in retaking Zenangwen this time, the Qingwei Taoist faction must have regarded him as a thorn in the flesh. Once Qianyuan Jianzong fell, the first unlucky one would be his Chen family. On this point, Chen Daoxian was very clear. He didn't expect him to kill a late nascent soul monk of the Qingwei Taoist sect, and the two sides could still shake hands and make peace. The only way at the moment is to help the Hall Master of Jinhai Palace to successfully raid the Qingwei Taoist sect. This is not only for Uncle 13, but also for the Qin family. Once Wan Xinghai falls, the fate of the Qin family will not be much better. Thinking of this, the relaxed mood after recovering Zhenengwen became heavy again. Not only Chen Daoxian, but everyone in the hall, all looked heavy. War always makes people feel heavy. But the war between Shenyuan Jianzong and Xianqing Dao League is no longer able to stop it. The two sides have been fighting for thousands of years, and they have already forged a feud. Unless the other side completely falls, this feud will never be eliminated. Everyone. Chen Daoxian spoke suddenly. When everyone saw the big man talking, they all turned their attention to him. Although Zhenengwen was taken down, but now that Wan Xinghai is attacking Azumo on all fronts, our Zhennan army naturally can't stick to this city. Hearing this, Fairy Qiao on the side was anxious, and she immediately transmitted a voice. Fellow Daoist Chen, Shizuan only asks us to stick to this city and not enter it rashly. Fairy, and rest assured. Chen Daoxian replied with a sound transmission and continued, therefore, I suggest that I go to the enemy-occupied area to inquire about the news. Young Patriarch can't do it. The rest did not speak, and Chen Fusheng immediately stood up to object. Chen Jinjin, think twice. Yeah, by winning Zhenengwen, our strategic goal has been achieved, and there is no need for real people to rush in. Everyone was discouraged. Fairy Qiao looked at Chen Daoxian with complicated eyes and was deeply moved. Shenyuan Jianzong's full-scale attack on Izumo is undoubtedly a bet on the luck of the sect. Once this battle is lost, Shenyuan Jianzong will not recover, but it will definitely go downhill. As the young sect master of Shenyuan Sword Sect, how could he not be moved to see an outsider like Chen Daoxian working so hard for Shenyuan Sword Sect? Not to mention Chen Daoxian, an outsider, he is a disciple of Shenyuan Jianzong's main sect, and there are several people who can achieve the level of Chen Daoxian when they are in a crisis of life and death. Thinking of this, Fairy Qiao could hardly restrain her affection for Chen Daoxian in her heart. She hurriedly stepped forward and said, Chen Daoxian, I'll go with you. This time, he directly addressed Chen Daoxian's name instead of Chen Daoyu. Chen Daoxian did not notice this slight change, turned his head to look at Fairy Qiao, and said with a smile, understand the kindness of the young sect master, but I will go to investigate alone, which is more flexible. Hearing this, Fairy Qiao immediately heard Chen Daoxian's implication. Also, Chen Daoxian is extremely powerful. Although he has only Jindan cultivation base, his strength is comparable to that of true monarch Yuaning. With her strength, even if she follows Chen Daoxian, it is just a burden. Thinking of this, Fairy Qiao no longer insisted, nodded and said, then, you should be careful in everything. Chen Daoxian nodded, then glanced at everyone, and disappeared in the hall with a flash. The law of space reaches the middle of the law realm and understands space teleportation. As long as Chen Daoxian does not die and falls into the formation arranged in advance by the enemy, even if several top true monarchs join forces, it will be difficult to win him. Seeing that the situation was not good, Chen Daoxian teleported, and then waved Mi Chen's flag, and immediately fled more than 100,000 miles away. No matter which top true monarch saw it, he would have a headache. Chen Daoxian's figure reappeared, and he had already crossed the Jushue Pass thousands of miles away, and had completely entered the area of the Shenqing Dao League. When he arrived at the enemy's territory, Chen Daoxian no longer teleported in a grand manner, but used the breath-holding technique to restrain his own breath. I saw that his breath had decayed all the way from the early stage of Jindan. Late period of Zifu, middle period of Zifu, early period of Zifu. The aura he exposed to the outside world lasted until the middle stage of foundation building before it stopped. Cultivation in the middle stage of foundation building. This cultivation is very common in the world of immortals, and it will not be disturbed by some unsightly scorns. It's just right. Chen Daoxian secretly said. Immediately, he controlled his facial skeletal muscles and moved quickly. About 10 interest. Chen Daoxian's face has changed into another look, and even his height has been raised by 3 points. Appearance, body shape, breath, all changed. Now, even if Chen Fusheng stood in front of him, he would not dare to recognize this person as his own young patriarch. Of course, although Chen Daoxian is proficient in the breath-holding technique, a cultivator with a stronger soul than him can still find flaws when he approaches. Therefore, Chen Daoxian had better stay away from true monarch Yuanying. However, Yuanying Jinjuan is not a Chinese cabbage. Although there are hundreds of Yuanying Jinjuan of Xianqing Dao League, but they are scattered in the country of Izumo and their sects, there are not so many Yuanying cultivators. In the major immortal cities of Izumo, and in the larger immortal cities, true monarch nascent soul is in charge. In an ordinary immortal city, at most there are only a few Jindan cultivators. Yuanying cultivator Chen Daoxian did not dare to say it, but Jindan cultivator, no matter how many he came, would only serve food in front of him. I have to say that Chen Daoxian, a cultivator with amazing strength, is shameless. Going to the hinterland of the Xianqing Dao League to destroy it will definitely involve the Xianqing Dao League's great energy. There are fewer Yuanying cultivators sent to encircle and suppress him, that is to say, if there are more people sent, Chen Daoxian will run again. Chen Daoxian felt a headache when he thought about it himself, let alone Xianqing Dao League. Now, the Xianqing Dao League still doesn't know that such a troublesome existence has been mixed into its own hinterland. When it comes to going to the enemy's hinterland alone to make a riot, Chen Daoxian is not inexperienced. When he single-handedly killed the real demon in the Great Yuan Demon Kingdom of the Real Demon Realm, he provoked the Yuanying monks to chase and kill him. It's just that at that time, his cultivation base and strength were too weak, and he only did it once, and he never dared to send his real body there again. The Shen clan leader brought a group of elders and juniors in the clan, and was almost frightened by Chen Daoxian's glance before he left. A long time. The head of the Shen family came back to his senses, and he immediately instructed everyone in the family, "Quick, go and have a look." Yes. High-level cultivators' fighting method does not rule out that there will be leftovers that will be discarded by the opponent at will. There are not many people who have the same idea as the Shen family leader. The distance of dozens of miles can be reached in the blink of an eye with the escape of a cultivator in the foundation building stage. There are many others who have the same idea as the Shen family, and all of them are foundation establishment cultivators. That is to say, the battle between the two Jindan real people broke out too fast, otherwise there will be a Zifu cultivator who will come to pick up the leak. When the cultivators met, they didn't say hello to each other. They all used their spiritual senses to carefully search for the path that the two Jindan real people flew through when they were fighting. Shingabai's divine sense swept across an object, and immediately became as clever as drinking ice water in a hot summer day. Storage ring. Shingabai's heart thumped. As a descendant of the Shen family, he knew very well that the storage ring, a high-level storage magic weapon, could only be equipped by cultivators above the Zifu period. So, Shinguibai swallowed fiercely, and immediately put away the storage ring calmly. Shinguibai thought that no one saw this action, but in fact, this action of his had already fallen into the eyes of the Shen clan chief Shen Maoqing. After some searching, everyone naturally found nothing. The cultivators looked at each other, those who knew each other handed each other's hands, and those who didn't know each other disappeared in a flash. Jindan cultivator fights, and one died. This matter will definitely cause a lot of waves in the vicinity of Jinyuan Xianqing. The Shen clan chief Shen Maoqing also returned to the clan with a group of people. The Shen clan land is located above a second-order spiritual vein. As a long-established alchemy family, the Shen family has more than one spiritual vein, but the spiritual vein of the clan is of the best quality. Usually, the clan chief and the more qualified clan members in the family cultivate here. Returning to the clan, Shen Maoqing immediately started the defensive formation. "Patriarch, are you?" One of the family elders did not know why. The other elders also looked at Shen Maoqing in surprise, as if waiting for an explanation from the other party. Shen Maoqing did not reply, but looked at Shen Guibai in the crowd. Seeing Shen Maoqing looking at him, Shen Guibai's face suddenly turned pale. Clan Patriarch. Shen Guibai lowered his head, not daring to look at Shen Maoqing. Take it out. Shen Maoqing stretched out his hand. Hearing this, Shen Guibai's heart was beating like a drum, and his breath was like an ox. After a long time, I was very reluctant to take out a storage ring from my arms. Storage ring? Guibai, where did you get this thing? Could it just be? Suddenly, some clan elders guessed the origin of this thing. And Shen Guibai lowered his head and said nothing. Shen Maoqing waved his sleeves, took the storage ring from Shen Guibai's hand, and sighed, "Do you know how much disaster it will bring to the family if you hide this thing?" Clan Patriarch, I was wrong. Shen Guibai lowered his head and said in despair. Get up. Shen Maoqing shook his head, then looked at the elders. Elders, although this thing has fallen into the hands of my Shen family, it is unpredictable. When everyone heard Shen Maoking's words, they all nodded seriously. They are not the treasures that Shen Guibai is so stunned, and the Jindan cultivators are fighting for their lives, how can they be involved? In particular, they faintly heard that the treasure that the other party was fighting for was a treasure like the pregnancy and infant pill, which made them feel hotter. At this time, a foundation-building elder stood up from the crowd and cupped his hands. Patriarch, the only solution for now is to dedicate this treasure to the Jin family. Good. What the fifth man said makes sense. This treasure is indeed out of our hands. Everyone agreed. Seeing this, Shen Maoqing nodded and said, that's all there is to it, since the fifth elder suggested it, then it's up to you to do it, and you must contact the Jin family as soon as possible. Remember, it's better, let me personally dedicate this treasure to the head of the Kim family. Hearing this, the fifth elder hesitated for a moment, but nodded and said, yes, Patriarch. Go. Shen Maoqing waved his hand. Everyone handed in their hands and left, and before leaving, they dragged the lost Shen Guibai to leave together. Seeing everyone walking away, Shen Maoqing immediately closed the cave formation. Walking into the depths of the cave, I saw a Shen family head who looked exactly like him, lying in a coma on the bed, surrounded by a small formation around the jade bed. From the outside, the jade bed was empty. In front of the jade bed, a black-robed cultivator is guarding here, the one who chased and killed Jindan cultivator before. The black-robe clone saw Chen Daoxian, turned into a black light, and got into Chen Daoxuan's Dantian Qi Si, and entered Chen Daoxuan's Dantian Qi Si with him, and there was a water-blue fairy sword. It is by virtue of this flying snow sword that the black-robe clone can be cultivated in the Zifu period and behead the Jindan real person in reverse. Otherwise, just relying on Chen Daoxuan's black-robe avatar is not necessarily an opponent of Jindan cultivator. Chapter 330. Jinyuan Xiansheng. Shen family land. A ray of light swept across the sky and landed in the discussion hall in the Shen family grounds. Inside the hall, the elders of the Shen family and the patriarch Shen Maoqing were already waiting for him. Seeing the light fall, everyone including Shen Maoqing stood up and looked at the person who came. 5. How is it? Fifth brother, what did the Jin family say? Yes, fifth brother. In the main hall, everyone gathered around them and asked in a row. The fifth elder of the Shen family looked around at everyone, and finally his eyes fell on the patriarch Shen Maoqing, nodding and saying, I asked for a relationship and saw an elder of the Jin family in Zifu. The family can go to present treasures to the ancestors of the Jin family at that time. Great. 5. I knew you had a way. When everyone heard the words of the fifth elder, they immediately became overjoyed. Shen Maoqing also smiled and nodded. 5. You did a good job. Oh yes, this is the spiritual stone that the family handed me to do things, and there are still some left. Taking the storage bag handed over by the fifth elder, Shen Maoqing weighed it, then handed it back and said, the fifth, you have accomplished this important event for the family, and you can keep the remaining spirit stones. This. The fifth elder glanced at everyone and found that everyone was looking at him with a smile on their faces, and immediately handed over to everyone, and happily accepted the storage bag. He also knew in his heart that if the Shen family could really climb up to the Jin family, they would soar to the sky in the future. In comparison, the amount of spirit stones sent out was nothing at all. You must know that the person standing behind the Jin family is Jinjuan Jinyuan, the nascent soul cultivator. Although Jinyuan Jinjuan belongs to the Xianyang sect, and he cannot open up a family of immortals, but the Jin family was founded by the descendants of Jinyuan Jinjuan. In the sphere of influence of Jinyuan Xianqing, which immortal family and loose cultivator dare not by the face of the Jin family. Even the family land of the Jin family is located in Jinyuan Xianqing, under the protection of Jinyuan Jinjuan, which shows how much Jinyuan Jinjuan attaches great importance to the Jin family. Once the Shen family relied on the Jin family, their status in the vicinity would at least rise several grades. Those big clans who looked down on the Shen family in the past may have to curry favor with the Shen family in the future. In addition to the improvement in status, what has a greater impact on the Shen family is interests. You must know that Jinjuan Jinyuan is the person who is in charge of the supply of resources for several immortal cities on the front line of the Shen Qingdao League, and he has a high authority. Seeing that the patriarch was in a good mood, the fifth elder on the side smiled and said, "The patriarch will come later when I go." Hearing this, Chen Daoxian nodded and smiled, "Go." After about a stick of incense, the fifth elder led a Zifu monk from the Jin family over. Seeing the fifth elder of the Shen family crouching down in front of this cultivator of the Jin family's purple house, Chen Daoxian smiled even happier. "Are you the head of the Shen family?" Chen Daoxian cupped his hands and said calmly, "Senior, it is the junior." Seeing that Chen Daoxian still showed a neither humble nor arrogant appearance when he saw him, the cultivator of the purple house nodded, "I heard that your Shen family has a big gift for my Jin family, and you must meet my Jin family ancestor in person, but is there something about it?" "That's true." Chen Daoxian nodded. Hearing this, the Jin family's Zifu cultivator threatened, "If the so-called treasure you took out contaminates the ancestor's eyes, is your Shen family ready to accept the anger of my ancestor?" "Senior, rest assured, since the junior insists on personally dedicating this treasure to old ancestor Jin, he is naturally confident." Seeing Chen Daoxian so confident, the Zifu cultivator nodded and said no more. Of course, the reason why he agreed to introduce the head of the Shen family to meet with old ancestor Jin was because he heard that a real person Jin Dan had fallen near the Shen family ground not long ago. This incident caused quite a stir in the vicinity of Jinyuan Xianqing. After all, Jin Dan Daoist is the strongest existence within hundreds of thousands of miles apart from Jinyuan Jinjuan. The fall of a Jin Dan Daoist will definitely cause a lot of shocks. Moreover, the ancestor of the Jin family even went to the Shen family's neighborhood to investigate after the incident. Based on multiple rumors, the Jin family learned that the two Jin Dan real people at that time seemed to have a conflict over a pregnant and infant pill. In this way, it makes sense for the two Jin Dan cultivators to fight to the death. Not long after that, the Shen family suddenly sent someone to present a gift to the Jin family. The Zifu cultivator, who was in charge of receiving the fifth elder of the Shen family at that time, immediately thought of the pregnant and infant pill. Knowing that this matter is of great importance, the Zifu cultivator did not dare to neglect, and immediately reported the matter to the ancestor. The old ancestor thought about it again and again and decided to let the Shen family secretly present this treasure when he attended his birthday banquet a month later. The reason why he was so sneaky was that the ancestor of the Jin family was thinking about the strong cultivator who killed the Jin Dan cultivator. Such a ruthless man, if he knew that his pregnant and infant pill was cut off by the ancestor of the Jin family, God would know what crazy actions the other party could make. The ancestor of the Jin family has been in the world of immortality for so long, and of course he doesn't think that he is arrogant because he is backed by the grandfather Jin Yuanzheng. Outsiders have rumored that the ancestor of the Jin family is very happy. In fact, the ancestor of the Jin family is not only extremely talented, but also very cautious. This is because he knew that the Shen family had the pregnant and infant pill in his hand, but he couldn't help but get it back immediately, so he knew a thing or two. Chen Daoxian followed behind the Zifu cultivator, walking around for more than an hour, before finally meeting the rumored ancestor of the Jin family in a palace. The ancestor of the Jin family looked very young, as if he was different from Chen Daoxian, and his cultivation level had reached the 9th level of Jin Dan, which was much higher than Chen Daoxuan's cultivation in the early stage of Jin Dan. Junior Shen Maoqing, see old ancestor Jin. Seeing the ancestor of the Jin family, Chen Daoxian hurriedly bowed. The ancestor of the Jin family nodded, and immediately waved at the Zifu cultivator beside Chen Daoxian. You go out first. Yes, old man. Watching the family's Zifu cultivator leave, the ancestor of the Jin family looked at Chen Daoxian and sighed. The courage of fellow Taoists is really admired by me. He paused. That's right, it's not surprising that you dare to do this with your fellow Taoist strength. I'm right, Chen Daoxian. Fellow Taoist Chen. Hear this. Chen Daoxian was shocked in his heart, but his face showed a look of daze, and murmured, I don't know what the senior said. Chen Daoxian paused. It's you, aren't you afraid that I will kill you? Or do you think you can deal with me with your strength and wait until your grandfather comes to help? My grandfather? Jin Chaining shook his head, with a mocking look on his face. Yes, he will indeed save me, but not to save me, but to save himself. It seemed that Jin Chaining's tone was quite resentful, and Chen Daoxian looked at him. Do you have a grudge against your grandfather? Hee. I can't talk about hatred. I have practiced for more than 300 years, and the cultivation resources I enjoyed during this period, even if the direct disciples of Xianyang's sect saw it, they would be jealous. And these cultivation resources are all provided by my grandfather, but what he did was not for me, but for himself. Said, Jin Chaining peeled off his Taoist robe, revealing his chest. I saw a complex blood-colored pattern that was round as a hole, deeply imprinted on Jin Chaining's chest. The blood slave contract. Chen Daoxian looked at Jin Chaining's chest and was shocked. The so-called blood slave contract is a very evil slave contract. The object of this slave contract is not outsiders, but one's own lineage. Seeing the blood slave contract on Jin Chaining's chest, Chen Daoxian instantly knew the cause and effect. In the cultivation world, after the cultivator reaches the nascent soul stage, he gradually has the possibility to seize the house. It's just that, although the cultivator can theoretically be revived for another life by taking another person, it will make the cultivator's soul and the body of the robbed person mutually exclusive. In order to solve this problem, some cultivators have developed a method to make their direct descendants the object of their own looting. This method requires that the deceased be cultivated by monks using secret methods from infancy, so that their bodies are more and more in line with the spirits of monks. Until the cultivator Shou Yuan is approaching, he will seize this carefully cultivated body and let him live again. Chen Daoxian, as a cultivator of the Jin Dan stage, has naturally heard of this famous evil secret technique. But it was the first time I saw it with my own eyes. As a family cultivator, Chen Daoxian abhorred the practice of tarnishing family affection and blood. Treat your bloodline as a seed, fertilize and cultivate it, and when the right time comes, pick the fruit of this seed, and the blood slave contract is the means to control this bloodline seed. However, the deed of blood slaves can control the life and death of slaves, but it cannot control the thoughts of slaves. At this point, the blood slave contract is still inferior to the soul seal of the imperial beast sect. Sure enough, when Chen Daoxian saw the blood pattern on Jin Chaining's chest, he immediately understood that this Jin Chaining wanted Jin Yuanjin to die more than he did. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxian couldn't help but lower his guard a bit. Although Chen Daoxian promoted the water movement sword intent to the law realm, reaching the initial stage of the water movement law, and he could also use the two-yield sword formation to initially integrate the water movement law and the space law, so that the power of the law skyrocketed. But no matter how the power skyrockets, whether the fusion law can match the late nascent soul monks is a matter of two things. Qin Daoxuan's most powerful means has always been the pure yang immortal artifact of the Xingqian Kendo map. But the Star Kendo map has a disadvantage, that is, it cannot be used for a long time. When he was able to win the true monarch Ming Huang, the time and place were right and people were indispensable, and it was only a narrow victory. Without the treasure of the Star's Kendo map, Qin Daoxian is not an opponent of true monarch Ming Huang. Even if he can use the sword array of Liangyi now, Qin Daoxian is not very sure. After all, how can he know what the power of the law after fusion is, and he has never fought in actual combat. But now, the opportunity for actual combat has come, but the difficulty is too great, and the four nascent soul true monarchs came all at once, which made Qin Daoxian feel a little caught off guard. See Qin Daoxian frowning. Jin Chanying said, "The best I can do is to help you deceive my grandfather, but you have to deal with him within 3 breaths. 3 breaths? Qin Daoxian shook his head. With the strength of the nascent soul cultivator, I only have a chance at most with 1 sword, and the other 3 nascent soul cultivators will be able to arrive in an instant." Hearing this, Jin Chanying frowned. After a long time, he sighed, "If it doesn't work, you can go out of the city. I haven't seen you today, and you haven't seen me either." Hearing this, Qin Daoxian did not speak. At this moment, he faintly retreated in his heart. The 4 nascent soul true monarchs, this is a bit too difficult. The fact that so many Yuanying monks rushed to the front also proved from the side that the strategy of Qianyuan Jianzong had worked. Only in this way, the difficulty of Qin Daoxuan's destruction has suddenly soared by more than 1 grade. Originally a monk in the middle of nascent soul, Qin Daoxian did not say that he was able to capture him, but he was quite confident. But now, with the arrival of the 4 Yuanying true monarchs, Qin Daoxian had to think about running away. Even if he can use the Star's Kendo map to fight against the 4 nascent soul monks for a short time, it will not last for a long time. After a long time, defeat will be a matter of time. Moreover, Qin Daoxian didn't know what means these 4 true monarchs of nascent soul had. If the other party had a means of restricting his escape, maybe he would really be planted here. Half an hour. Qin Daoxian looked up at Jin Chanying and asked, "Do you know where your grandfather's treasure is?" "Ah." Without saying a word, Qin Daoxian stabbed the flying snow sword directly into Jin Chanying's Dantian Qi Si. Seeing the flying sword entering the body, Jin Chanying's expression did not change at all. Although Qin Daoxian agreed to cooperate with him, he still needs at least some insurance. Both parties are very clear about this. Hanging the flying snow sword in Jin Chanying's body, Qin Daoxian nodded and said, let's go to Qian Immortal Mansion together." "Okay." Jin Chanying felt the terrifying law of water movement in the Dantian Qi Si and nodded. The immortal sword transformed by this law of water movement is more threatening than the blood slave contract on his chest. If he deceives Qin Daoxian only needs to think about it, and his Fei Shui sword can instantly twist Jin Chanying's golden core into pieces. 7017K. No, Jin Chanying shook his head. However, according to what I confided in the Scarlet Flame Immortal Mansion, every time the old thief came here, he acted very mysteriously, and there is a great possibility that this is his treasure room. Hearing this, Qin Daoxian seriously looked at the palace in front of him. This palace occupies a small area, but it is shrouded in a 5th-order formation, and this 5th-order formation is still open. Seeing this, Qin Daoxian had a headache, turned to look at Jin Chanying and said, "Do you have a way to enter the palace?" The unhosted 5th-order formation could not stop Qin Daoxian. But the problem is, once he forcibly breaks the formation, it will inevitably cause a huge movement. At that time, Jin Yuanjinjuan, who has been disturbed, will definitely come here directly. Qin Daoxuan's idea of using Jinyuan Zhenjin's treasure to improve his strength will also fail. Jin Chanying shook his head, no. Hearing this answer, Qin Daoxian couldn't help but feel a little worried. Jin Chanying didn't speak anymore. He had already brought him to Jinyuan's treasure room according to Qin Daoxuan's suggestion. As for whether he could open this treasure room, he couldn't guarantee it. Seeing that Chen Daoxian did not speak, Jin Chanying was also a little discouraged. Using the hand in front of him to get rid of Jinyuan Zhenjuan is the best way for him to get out of Jinyuan Zhenjun's control, but it seems that it is difficult for Chen Daoxian to compete with the four nascent soul Zhenjuan at the same time. Chen Daoxian didn't say a word, turned around this palace for a few times, and finally determined that the formation outside the palace in front of him was a fifth-order low-grade defense formation. To be able to set up a fifth-order defense formation in such a small area is no less difficult than the sixth-order defense formation that covers the entire Jinyuan Xiancheng. Chen Daoxuan's formation realm is a big realm higher than his refining level, reaching the fourth-order high grade, which is not too far from the fifth-order formation master. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxian simply sat in the air, his eyes staring at the formation in front of him. This. When Jin Chanying saw Chen Daoxian sitting here cracking the formation, he couldn't help but shouted that he was too reckless. What is the difference between this and the Arabian Nights? Seeing that Jin Chanying was in a hurry like an ant on a hot pot, Chen Daoxian said in a voice transmission, "Fellow Daoist, instead of being anxious, why don't you help me get rid of the servants of Qian Immortal Mansion, and don't let outsiders disturb me?" Hearing this, Jin Chanying struggled for a while. After a long time, he took a deep breath and nodded, "Okay. Since fellow Taoists are confident, I'll put all my bets on fellow Taoists." Chen Daoxian glanced at him, then turned his head and stopped talking. Jin Chanying is also a decisive person.
After making a decision, he immediately left here to support Chen Daoxuan's servants of Qian Immortal Mansion. As for Zhenjuan Jinyuan, who is in retreat, it is not something he can control. After Jin Chanying left, within a radius of several miles, only Chen Daoxian sat cross-legged. It seems that he is sitting here stupidly, but in fact, Chen Daoxuan's comprehension stars in the sea of knowledge are spinning wildly at the moment. His comprehension is also soaring wildly at this moment. 10 times understanding, 30 times understanding, 50 times understanding, 100 times understanding. After comprehension broke through 100 times, the consumption of comprehension stars suddenly rose a step. Compared with the improvement of comprehension within 100 times, the comprehension is more than 100 times, and each time the comprehension is doubled, the consumption of comprehension stardust doubles. With such a superposition, no matter how big Chen Daoxuan's comprehension stars are, he can't stand this consumption speed. 108 times, enough. Chen Daoxian was deeply distressed when he saw that in the space of the sea of knowledge, the comprehension stars became smaller at a speed visible to the naked eye. If you invest so much, if the treasure of Jinyuan Zhenjuan can't be filled, it will be a big loss. The thought in his heart was fleeting, and Chen Daoxian concentrated on comprehending the fifth-order low-grade defense formation in front of him. In the eyes of ordinary monks, the fifth-order formation is arranged with the help of the power of heaven and earth. After the formation eyes and formation patterns are all integrated into the world, and there is no flaw at all. But in the eyes of the same-order array masters, the fifth-order array method is not without flaws. Even though Chen Daoxuan's formation realm has only reached the fourth level, with the blessing of 108 times his understanding, he can see the flaws of this formation. In Chen Daoxuan's eyes, the light of spirituality kept flickering. In the end, his eyes fell on the plaque of the palace. A smile appeared on Chen Daoxuan's face. The flaw in the formation is actually here. Chen Daoxian stood up and stretched out his palm. In the palm of his hand, a mysterious array of lines condensed, and finally, Chen Daoxian waved at the plaque of the palace. This fifth-order low-grade defense formation slowly dissipated, without causing any movement. See the formation dissipate. A flash of surprise flashed in Chen Daoxuan's eyes, and he immediately raised his legs and walked towards the palace. After entering the palace, Chen Daoxian was stunned by the sight in front of him. Compared with the storage ring of true monarch Ming Huang, the treasures in the palace in front of him are a dazzling array. In comparison, the Ming Huang Zhenjuan in the late Yuaning period was really poor.
Of course, it is more likely that all the wealth of true monarch Minghuang is not just in a storage ring. Stepping into the palace, the first thing that catches your eye is a piece of high-level magic weapon. At the point of entry, one by one is held up in the air by the floating formation, and the magical instruments overflowing with spiritual light are dazzling people's eyes. At first glance, none of these instruments was lower than the fourth rank. Moreover, the types of instruments in front of them are complete, including offensive, defensive, auxiliary, and so on. And each type of magic weapon has different styles. For example, among the offensive instruments, there are single-handled flying swords, complete sets of female and female flying swords, sun and moon rings, and seals, etc. As Chen Daoxuan's pace deepened, he found that the rank of the instruments was getting higher and higher. In the end, there were actually 13 fifth-order instruments presented in front of him. Most of the 13 fifth-order artifacts were low-rank 5th-rank and middle-rank 5th-rank artifacts, and there were only 3 high-rank 5th-rank artifacts. Among them, there are 2 fifth-order high-grade instruments that are in the style of flying swords. These 2 flying swords, one is a fire attribute flying sword, and the other is a metal flying sword. When Chen Daoxian saw these 2 flying swords, he immediately grabbed them overjoyedly. Under the absorption of his mana, the 2 masterless flying swords flew to his palm without hindrance, turning into 2 small swords about 3 inches long, hovering in his palm. Good baby! Chen Daoxian was very excited when he saw 2 high-grade 5th-rank flying swords. So far, these 2 flying swords are the highest-grade flying swords he has obtained. Even Fei Xue and Chengying Shuangjian who have followed him all the way up to now are only low-rank 5th-rank and middle-ranking 5th-rank. As for the Xianhuang Zhentian Pagoda, although it is a 5th-order high-grade magic weapon, it is a Taoist magic weapon. It is an auxiliary magic weapon, not an offensive magic weapon, nor a flying sword. For Chen Daoxian, a sword cultivator, his obsession with flying swords is obviously far more than other types of instruments. After playing with the flying sword for a while, Chen Daoxian reluctantly put it into the storage ring. And put the other 11 fifth-order instruments and hundreds of fourth-order instruments into the storage ring. Until this moment, Chen Daoxian really felt how rich the Jinyuan Zhenjuan who had been in Jinyuan Xiancheng for more than 2,000 years. 11 fifth-order instruments, ordinary nascent soul cultivators, with 3 or 5 fifth-order instruments in their entire net worth, would be considered pretty good. Because the fifth-order magic weapon is different from the low-level magic weapon, this thing is not something you can buy if you have a spirit stone. Usually. Chapter 333. No? Chen Daoxian searched for a long time in the palace where Zhenjuan Jinyuan was hiding treasures, but he didn't find a trace of the power of creation. Why not? Chen Daoxian couldn't believe it. Not only is there no power of creation, but the inextinguishable true meaning of helping nascent soul cultivators to improve their body refinement, there is no trace in this treasure palace. There are magic tools, spirit armor, and various fourth-order spiritual pills and medicines, but there is no power of creation and indestructible true meaning. Chen Daoxian frowned. No, there are no treasures to help Jindan stage cultivators break through to nascent soul stage. After searching for a long time, Chen Daoxian found a problem. Not only are there no treasures to enhance the cultivation and strength of the nascent soul cultivators, but there are also no spiritual pills that assist the Jindan cultivators to break through. Even, there is no elixir to improve the cultivation of Jindan stage cultivators. It seems Jinyuan Zhenjuan did not collect such treasures to enhance the cultivation of Jindan cultivators, as well as the strength and cultivation of nascent soul cultivators. But how is this possible? Chen Daoxian frowned. Could it be that? He raised his head. Jinyuan Zhenjuan knew for a long time that Jin Chanying knew about this treasure room, and this palace was deliberately displayed by Jinyuan Zhenjuan. Chen Daoxian could imagine that if Jin Chanying really abolished the power of 9 bulls and 2 tigers and opened the defense formation of the palace, only to find that there was no treasure he wanted in the palace. That sense of loss is expected to drive Jin Chanying crazy and turn him into a walking corpse with no thought and no will to resist. I'm afraid this is what Zhenjuan Jinyuan wants. Chen Daoxian thought to himself. However, Chen Daoxian doesn't care if there is a pregnancy and baby pill, but without the power of good fortune, Chen Daoxuan's thoughts of breaking through in the battle are all in vain. Is it really necessary to retreat strategically? Just when Chen Daoxian hesitated, he suddenly raised his head and glanced at the gate of the palace. Come out. Chen Daoxian said indifferently. Long before entering the palace, Chen Daoxian vaguely felt that there was an obscure consciousness peeping at him. But Chen Daoxian can be sure that the other party is not a Yuanian cultivator, because the sense of threat to him by this spiritual sense is completely zero, and it cannot be the spiritual consciousness of the Yuanian cultivator at all. The voice just fell. At the gate of the palace, a purple figure slowly appeared. It's you. Chen Daoxuan's eyes narrowed slightly. What a thief, who dares to steal the treasure of the true monarch? Aren't you afraid that I will tell the true monarch and smash you to ashes? Chen Daoxian was quite speechless, and directly pointed his finger at her. Immediately, an invisible space fluctuation swept across Ziling's body, and then, a layer of space barriers wrapped Ziling tightly. See this scene. Ziling frowned first, then touched the space barrier formed by the space cage, and looked at Chen Daoxian in confusion. What are you doing? Chen Daoxian. Nothing. Chen Daoxian suddenly felt that it was really difficult for him to explain his strength to this female cultivator named Ziling. Because even if she easily defeated the other party, in her cognition, isn't it right and proper for the Jindan cultivator to defeat the Zifu cultivator? The crux of the question is, how can he convince Ziling that his strength is stronger than that of Jin Yuanzhenjuan, and he can let her get rid of Jin Yuanzhenjuan's control? Seeing that Chen Daoxian did not speak, Ziling looked at him strangely and asked, why don't you speak? The lie was pierced, and you can't speak? Chen Daoxian. That's it, Ziling sighed, since I can cooperate with Jin Chanying, I don't care if you have a collaborator in the early stage of Jindan. Speaking of this, Ziling turned serious. Jin Yuanzhenjuan's life is coming, he wants to take Jin Chanying's body before the end of his life, and I, after Jin Yuanzhen successfully took the house, broke through the Yuan again. The key to infancy. Ding furnace. Chen Daoxian immediately understood the meaning of Ziling's words, you are the body of Zhouyin Xuanqi. Ziling nodded bitterly. In the world of immortals, it is very common to regard beautiful female cultivators as cauldrons. If you don't consider moral perception, the Ding furnace is even better than the elixir to a certain extent. Cultivators take spiritual pills to practice, and there are still erysipelas left in the body, so they cannot take them frequently. The cauldron is different. The monks use the cauldron to repair and cultivate, and they follow the yin-yang avenue. Not to mention that this process makes people feel relaxed and happy, and the sequelae of the key mining and repairing practice are extremely small. This is also the reason why the cauldron in the immortal world has been repeatedly banned. After all, the high-ranking female cultivator also hated the matter of the cauldron. Many famous fairies in Xian Yunzu saw a male cultivator treat a female cultivator as a cauldron, and they usually drew their swords directly without saying a word. Even so, the wind of the cauldron is still prohibited. It stands to reason that the supreme ruler of Wanxinghai, the sect master of Chenyuan Jianzong, is a female cultivator. Shouldn't Wanxinghai be reduced to a cauldron without a female cultivator? In fact, in the hundreds of years when Wanxinghai attacked Izumo, countless captured female cultivators have become the cauldrons of Wanxinghai cultivators. The first time Chen Daoxian participated in the auction in Xianqing of Guang'an Mansion, he met the female cultivator prisoner of war who was auctioned. It can be said that beauty without strength is often a sin in the world of immortals, and it will be targeted by countless evil cultivators. The female nun named Ziling in front of her is a typical example. If it is said that ordinary cauldrons are only of great help to monks' practice, then the female cultivator of the nine yin and mysterious body is the most effective of all cauldrons. No one. Using the body of Zhouyin profound concubine as a cauldron can not only quickly help the cultivator improve his cultivation, but more importantly, she can also help the male cultivator to break through the threshold of the great realm. For example, the the Zifu period breaks through to the Jindan period, and the Jindan period breaks through to the Yuanying period. Even a female cultivator with the body of the 9 profound concubine is high enough to even break through from the nascent soul stage to the nascent soul stage. This kind of cauldron can be of great help. This beautiful female cultivator named Ziling, when she heard Chen Daoxian revealing his identity as a mysterious body of 9, not only did not have the slightest pride, but a little bit of hatred. If it weren't for the mysterious body of Jiuyin, perhaps she would not have been targeted by Xinju and Jinyuan. Hearing that Xiling has the body of Jiuyin Xianzhang, Chen Daoxian knew what he had guessed before, that Jin Chanying had an improper relationship with the other party, so the possibility is unlikely. Because this female cultivator in front of him will be of great help to Jin Yuanjin to break through the nascent soul stage again after taking the house in the future, Jin Yuanjin will never allow Jin Chanying to touch Xiling. Chen Daoxian was sure that this man named Ziling must have the means of restraint laid down by Xinju and Jin Yuan. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxian finally understood why this female cultivator named Ziling dared to come to this treasure room to find him directly. It turned out to be fearless. Not caring to sympathize with the other party, Chen Daoxian nodded. Since you promised to cooperate, then show the sincerity of cooperation. Hearing this, Ziling gave Chen Daoxian a deep look. I have to say, the courage and appetite of fellow Taoists are the greatest I have ever seen. Thanks for the compliment. Seeing Chen Daoxian's cheeky appearance, Ziling said angrily, this is where the treasure of true monarch Jin Yuan is located, but his treasure is divided into light and dark. The difference between light and dark? Chen Daoxian looked at her thoughtfully. Ziling didn't give a shit, and walked straight to a decorated vase in the treasure room. She pinched the magic formula and pointed at the vase. Suddenly, the vase spun up and down. After about hundreds of turns, a light curtain appeared in front of Chen Daoxian and Ziling Dongtian. Chen Daoxian secretly called Jin Yuan Zhenjuan cunning. Yes, it's Dongtian. Ziling nodded and took the lead in walking towards Dongtian. Without saying a word, Chen Daoxian followed her directly and walked into the cave. Stepping into the cave, a scene of birds chirping and flowers comes into view, giving people a sense of willows and flowers. The cave built by Xinju and Jinyuan is not very big, but what is installed here is the essence of his thousands of years of savings. Chen Daoxian found that what existed the most in this cave was not the power of creation, but the true meaning of immortality. Indestructible true meaning, the shape is a strange substance as dark as ink. This kind of material is very strange. When scattered, it is like smoke, and it is misty. When gathered, it is like a diamond, and it weighs more than 10,000 tons. Inside the cave, boxes filled with immortality filled the entire courtyard. Chen Daoxian glanced at it and found that there were actually 17 boxes. When the treasure box was opened, each treasure box was densely packed with inextinguishable true meaning aggregates shaped like black diamonds. Compared with the true meaning of immortality, Jinyuan Zhenjuan has much less power of creation. Perhaps in Jinyuan Zhenjin's opinion, the power of good fortune is far less precious than the true meaning of immortality. After all, although the power of good fortune can improve the rank of instruments, it cannot directly improve the cultivation of monks. After all, for monks, their own cultivation and the realm of the great Tao are the fundamentals. Magical instruments are precious, but in the final analysis they are only external forces. As long as the cultivation base can break through, do you still worry about finding a suitable magic weapon in the future? But for Chen Daoxian, the preciousness of the power of creation is by no means under the true meaning of immortality. Even for now, it is far more than the true meaning of immortality. Because the indestructible true meaning is not available to him now, with his skull-shattering cultivation base, the indestructible true meaning is the most violent poison in the world. As long as it is integrated into the body, it will completely disintegrate his body. The treasure of immortal true meaning can only be used little by little if the cultivator's body refinement reaches the peak of the blood-dripping realm. Of course, if the cultivator's Tao realm is high enough, it is not impossible to use the immortal true meaning in advance under the protection of the Tao law, but the premise is that the intake of the immortal true meaning is strictly controlled. Just with Chen Daoxian's body training, no matter how high the Tao realm is. With the strength of his physical body, it is estimated that after encountering the true meaning of immortality, the physical body will gasify directly, and it will be too late for rescue. Now he even opens the treasure chest containing the true meaning of immortality, and it is opened with the power of the law condensed by the law of space, and he does not dare to use mana casually. Chen Daoxian was afraid that this thing would infect his body along the mana. On the side, Ziling saw that Chen Daoxian was actually daring to open the treasure chest containing the true meaning of immortality, and she was suddenly shocked. Just wanted to scold, but found Chen Daoxian standing there safe and sound. The words of scolding could not help but hold back. She stared at Chen Daoxian with her beautiful eyes and said, 17 treasure chests, 3 bottles of the power of creation, these are all the hidden treasures of Jinju and Jinyuan. In particular, these 17 treasure chests are enough for a cultivator in the early nascent soul who has just merged with the indestructible true meaning into his body, and cultivated into an indestructible true body. You actually know the real body of immortality? Chen Daoxian looked at Ziling playfully. Humph. Ziling snorted softly and turned her head. Seeing that Ziling was unhappy, Chen Daoxian immediately skipped this topic. I didn't expect that Jinju and Jinyuan would actually trust you so much. He thought that after taking Jin Chanying, a female cultivator of the 9 profound body, can cooperate with his double cultivation to obtain the best cultivation effect. Jinyuan Zhenjin's ambition is very big, thinking of impacting the Yuan dynasty. God. I can tell. Chen Daoxian couldn't help nodding when he saw the various preparations of this true monarch Jinyuan. 17K. Chapter 334. Chen Daoxian flipped through the inextinguishable true meaning aggregate like a black diamond for a while, then covered the treasure chest, put it aside, and turned to look at the 3 bottles of the power of creation. He stretched out his hand and took the 3 jade bottles containing the power of creation into his palm, and he couldn't help but breathe a little too quickly. Aside. Ziling was quite surprised when she saw Chen Daoxian's actions. In her opinion, although the power of creation is precious, it is far from the true meaning of immortality. After all, the true meaning of immortality is a treasure for improving the cultivation of cultivators, and the power of good fortune is just a treasure to promote the magic weapon, which is far from comparable to the true meaning of immortality. Because for monks, cultivation is the foundation. Although he couldn't understand it, Ziling didn't ask any more questions. Okay, you can go out. Chen Daoxian waved his hands without turning his head. You. Ziling was anxious. She had seen people crossing the river and demolishing bridges, but she had never seen someone as anxious as Chen Daoxian. Chen Daoxian turned around and saw the angry Ziling. He immediately understood what was going on, and smiled. Fairy Ziling, don't worry, I will do what I promise you. Fairy goes out and waits first. I am here, are you still worried that I will run away? When Ziling heard this, she thought about what Chen Daoxian said was reasonable, and nodded. They'll believe you for a while. After all, the light flashed, and he came out of the cave. Chen Daoxian's consciousness followed closely and found that after Ziling had left the cave, he walked straight out of the treasure palace, and his heart relaxed slightly. Now. There was only Chen Daoxian left in this small cave. He didn't care about being reserved, and immediately opened the jade bottle, and the power of fortune like chalcedony came into view. Chen Daoxian swept his consciousness and found that the power of creation in this jade bottle actually contained 100 drops. 3 bottles are 300 drops of the power of creation, and it takes 300 years of hard work by a nascent soul true monarch. Although these powers of good fortune are quite large, they are still too little for Jinju and Jinyuan, a cultivator of the nascent soul stage who is nearing his lifespan. But Chen Daoxian was relieved when he thought about the 13 fifth-order artifacts he found in the treasure palace. You must know that cultivating a magic weapon to the 5th rank is not a small amount of good fortune. Perhaps, Jinyuan Jinjuan has spent most of the power of creation. In fact, only a very small number of nascent soul monks can store a large amount of the power of creation. The promotion of the law of water movement to the middle of the law realm will not improve my strength very much, and the law of water movement and the law of space are in the same realm, so it will be more difficult to integrate. Instead of this, it is better to concentrate all the power of creation and fight to see if the space law can be promoted to the high level of the law realm. When the space law is promoted to the high level of the law, I can master the space strangulation, the power of killing skyrockets, and supplemented by the fusion of the water movement law, it can increase the power of the space law. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxian decided to fight and be promoted to Qingying sword. Chen Daoxian is not a hesitant. Since he decided to be promoted to Qingying sword, Chen Daoxian decisively opened the 3 jade bottles filled with the power of creation, and poured all the power of creation on the 3-inch transparent flying sword. Soon, a drop of the chalcedony-like power of fortune melted into the transparent blade. As the power of good fortune was integrated into the Qingying sword, the original 5th-rank middle-grade Qingying sword suddenly soared in aura. In mid-air, mysterious formations appeared out of thin air, and they all merged into the Qingying sword. The formation method is self-contained, and the formation is integrated into the device. Although it is not the first time to see this scene, Chen Daoxian is still shocked by this magical scene every time he sees it. Not long after the last drop of the power of creation was integrated into the Qingying sword, the last array pattern also merged into the Qingying sword. At this moment, the Qingying sword began to vibrate violently, as if something was brewing in it, trying to break out of its shell. Around the Qingying sword, the space is like a water pattern, rippling outward in circles. Not good. Seeing the spatial fluctuations that oscillated like water ripples, Chen Daoxian secretly cried out in his heart. Sure enough, as he had guessed. This cave can't stand the toss of the Qingying sword after the spatial law is embodied. Only when the other party rippled the 3rd circle of spatial ripples, the entire cave began to crumble, as if it would collapse completely in the next second. See this scene. Chen Daoxian couldn't care about the Qingying sword that was being promoted, and immediately took the Qingying sword and the remaining 17 boxes of indestructible true meaning into his pocket, and got out of this cave. Just when Chen Daoxian stepped out of the cave with his forefoot. Boom! A dull thunder-like explosion suddenly sounded in the treasure palace. With the sound of the explosion, the small cave where Zhenjuan Jinyuan was hiding his treasure shattered. Who? A thunderous roar suddenly sounded in the Scarlet Flame Immortal Mansion. Hearing this roar, all the maids in the Qian Immortal Mansion fell to their knees, trembling all over. Outside the treasure palace, Jin Chanying and Xiling both turned pale. Don't look at how daring they were when they calculated Jin Yuan Zhenjuan, but when they really faced the anger of a nascent soul cultivator, they were still overwhelmed with fright. Jin Chanying is a little better, after all, his cultivation base has reached the 9th level of Jin Dan, and he is only 1 step away from the nascent soul stage. Xiling, the 9th floor cultivator of the Z mansion, was so frightened that he didn't even dare to breathe, and he was completely in a state of no control. Just when the two were in a panic, a terrifying figure condescendingly appeared in front of the two of them. If it's not Zhenjuan Jinyuan, who is he? Jinyuan Zhenjuan was wearing a red gold python robe and a jade crown. His face was rosy and delicate like a baby. Looking at his face, Jinyuan Zhenjuan was very similar to Jin Chanying. The only difference between the two is that Jinyuan Zhenjuan is full of silver hair, while Jin Chanying looks very young. At this moment, Jinyuan's face was ashen. He stared at Jin Chanying and said, "Two people who eat inside and outside, it's in vain that I value you so much on weekdays. Hear this." Xiling didn't react yet, but Jin Chanying was completely blown away. Huh, take it seriously? He seemed mad. It's just you who deserves to respect me. That's right, all the resources I have enjoyed since I was a child were provided to me by you, but you didn't do it for me, it was for yourself. Saying that, Jin Chanying tore the clothes on his chest, exposing his chest. What is this? You tell me, what is this? Jin Chanying's face flushed. The contract of blood slaves, this is what you value. Listening to Jin Chanying's roar, he seemed to vent. Jinyuan Zhenjuan's face was as usual, and he said coldly, "Nya barrier thing, are you finished?" Jean Chanying stared at him fiercely, panting like a cow, but after all, he didn't dare to speak. "When you're done talking, it's time to talk about it." True monarch Jin Yuan continued, "That's right, I admit that I have the idea of taking you as the object of my body, but that's just an idea. Do you think I must be yours?" Hearing this, Jean Chanying pursed her lips and stopped talking. Of course he knew this. If he hadn't known that Jinjuan Jin Yuan had other spare tires, he would not have died without a doubt, and he would have resisted long ago. The reason why Jean Chanying has not made up his mind to resist is because he knows that he is not a mortal situation. Seeing that Jean Chanying was no longer speaking, Jinjuan Jin Yuan turned his head to look at Ziling, and said coldly, "What about you, cheap maid? Why did you betray this seat? This seat is not good enough for you. In order to follow your heart, for so many years, this seat has forcibly endured not touching you, and also handed over everything to you in the Qian Immortal Mansion. Is this how you repay my trust?" When Ziling heard this, her anger completely overwhelmed her fear. With a thump in her head, she said hoarsely, "Are you good to me? Back then my parents didn't want me to enter this tiger's den, and both of them died. Do you dare to say that this has nothing to do with you? In your Qian Immortal Mansion, you have more women than the sergeant who guards the city. Old demon Jinyuan, you have recruited so many female cultivators, and you have long been notorious in Izumo. Do you think I don't know? That's right, you too, today finally spoke out what was in your heart." True monarch Jin Yuan said with a sneer, "But even if you are angry, so what? Do you think that you can escape the palm of this seat just by relying on you?" Hearing this, Jean Chanying and Ziling couldn't help but feel angry. True monarch Jin Yuan is right, don't look at his Nearsho Yuan, but he is a mid-wanting cultivator after all, and dealing with a late-stage Jindan cultivator and a late-stage Zifu cultivator is just like playing. Not all Jindan cultivators are as perverted as Chen Daoxian. It is the norm in the world of immortals that the Yuanian cultivator kills the Jindan cultivator like killing a dog. Seeing that the two did not speak, Jinjuan Jin Yuan looked at Jean Chanying and snorted coldly, "After all, this lowly maid is an outsider, he betrayed this seat can bear it, you are a wicked obstacle, you actually eat inside and out and cooperate with outsiders to steal the old man. The treasures of my ancestors should be punished." The words just finished. Jinjuan Jin Yuan stretched out his palm and grabbed it towards Jean Chanying. Seeing this, Jean Chanying certainly didn't want to sit still. He immediately used his whole Bodis mana and was ready to fight to the death, but suddenly he felt his whole body sink, as if 10 mountains were pressing on him, making him unable to move. This. Jean Chanying's heart trembled, the law of soil movement, the tenfold mountain situation. Jinjuan Jin Yuan said with a smile, "Since you recognize the old man's method, why don't you just capture it? Don't think about it." "Humph, stubborn." True monarch Jin Yuan no longer held his hand, and the tenfold mountain situation broke out with all his strength. This time, the mana in Jean Chanying's body became like lead and mercury, so heavy that it could hardly function. No matter how much Jin Dan in his Dantian is urged, his mana will not obey. Seeing this scene, Jean Chanying finally panicked. A Jin Dan cultivator lost his control of mana, and at least lost 70% to 80% of his strength. In addition, his body was also crushed by the tenfold mountain, and he couldn't move. Seeing his appearance, Jin Yuan Jinjuan seemed to be unresolved, and the power of the tenfold mountain broke out again. Boom! Jean Chanying was pressed to kneel on the jade ground outside the palace, and the rubble sputtered, slicing Ziling's pretty face with blood. Seeing that he had completely suppressed Jean Chanying, Jinjuan Jin Yuan nodded with satisfaction, and immediately grabbed him with his bare hands. At this moment, a sudden change occurred. I saw a flying sword rushing out from Jean Chanying's Dantian. This Bingfijian appeared too abruptly, and the speed was extremely fast. Even if Jin Yuan Jinjuan was in the middle of Yuan Ying's cultivation base, he couldn't react at such a close distance. You! Jinjuan Jin Yuan felt the power of this sword, and a sense of panic surged in his heart. The power of the law. He felt the power of the law on this flying sword. It is the Yuanian cultivator, and the Yuanian cultivator is attacking him. Zhenjuan Jin Yuan immediately spread his consciousness wildly, and at the critical moment, a layer of spiritual armor covered the surface of his body, blocking the flying snow sword from sneak attacking. Clang. With a loud bang, the figure of Jin Yuan Zhenjuan flew in response, smashing one palace after another. 17K. At this time, Ziling, whose pretty face was pale, finally had the opportunity to take a deep breath. After taking a few breaths, Ziling looked at Chen Daoxian with a hint of gratitude. Jin Chanying's gaze towards Chen Daoxian was more complicated, with admiration, jealousy, and shame. He admired and envied Chen Daoxian, who was also a Jindan cultivator, but had such a heaven-defying strength. He was ashamed that the two were called collaborators, but in fact he couldn't help at all. A bystander in this battle, no, Jin Chanying suspects that together with this battle, he doesn't even have the chance to watch at close range. This undoubtedly made it difficult for him, who was naturally proud, to accept. But no matter how hard it is to accept, the fact is the fact. Although Chen Daoxian walked past him and took all the pressure, his eyes were not focused on him and Ziling. Now, all Chen Daoxuan's mind was focused on the three Yuaning true monarchs who arrived quickly, especially the late Yuaning cultivator of the Qingwei Taoist sect. To Chen Daoxuan's surprise, this late nascent soul true monarch was actually a female cultivator. According to the information Chen Daoxian had learned in advance, among the nascent soul cultivators in the Qingwei Taoist sect, the proportion of female cultivators was extremely low, about less than 10%. As for the female cultivators in the late nascent soul, the number was even smaller. As far as he knew, there were only 3 female cultivators in the entire Qingwei Taoist sect who had reached the late nascent soul. And the most famous one is undoubtedly the Qingwei Taoist Palace Master Yu Yue. From his name, it can be seen that the Palace Master of Yu Yue is on the same level as the Palace Master of the 7th Palace of Chen Yuan Sword Sect. Top True Monarch. At this moment, Chen Daoxian could only pray secretly in his heart. The person who came here was not the Palace Master Yu Yue, but someone else. Otherwise, the outcome of today's battle would be unpredictable. Whoa! In the distance, Zhenjuan Jinyuan, who was slashed by Chen Daoxuan's sword, stood up from the ruins of the palace and slowly lifted into the air, wearing a black spirit armor. The other 3 true monarchs of the Qingwei Dao faction also arrived, and the 4 of them stood in the air, and they were vaguely surrounding Chen Daoxian. Palace Master. After Zhenjuan Jin Yuan took off, he did not look at Chen Daoxian again, but bowed slightly to the female cultivator of the late nascent soul not far away. Below. Chen Daoxuan's heart sank completely when he heard the palace lord's voice from Zhenjuan Jin Yuan. In the Qingwei Taoist sect, there is only one female cultivator in the late nascent soul who can be called the Palace Master by Jin Yuanjin, the Palace Master of Yu Yue Palace. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxuan's heart gradually sank. He realized that the trouble he encountered was much bigger than he expected. A top true monarch at the master level of the Chen Yuan Sword Sect Hall, and 3 monks in the middle of the nascent soul. From the outside, Chen Daoxian was just a cultivator in the early stage of Jindan. The strength of the 2 sides is seriously unequal. Palace Master Yu Yue was wearing a solemn and gorgeous Taoist robe. On the Taoist robe, there were lines of formations outlined. Just standing there, he exuded a compelling aura. The sect master really expected things like God, but I didn't expect that Shenyuan Zhenzong would send you to attack the logistics ferry city of my Xianqing Dao League. The palace lord Yu Yue said coldly, Chen Daoxian, this palace misses you with your talents. If you let me down the Xianqing Dao alliance, this palace can intercede for you and spare your life. How about it? Get around me. Chen Daoxian said with a smile, true monarch Ming Huang's bones are not yet cold. You're doing this too, isn't it too chilling for the disciples of the Qingwei Taoism? Hearing this sarcasm, Palace Master Yu Yu's cold and pretty face was immediately covered with frost, and she said word by word, Chen Daoxian, since you want to court death, this palace will fulfill you. On the side, Zhenjuan Jin Yuan heard this, and hurriedly said, "Palace master, calm down, if there is a war in the city, I'm afraid." Hearing this, Palace Lord Yue glanced at Jin Yuan Xiancheng, nodded to the three of them and said, "You use the Taoist magic weapon to reinforce this airspace. Abide by the decree of the Palace Master." Among the three, Jin Yuan Zhenjuan belonged to the Xianyang sect, and the other two belonged to the Qingwei Taoist sect. But compared to the Palace Master of Yue Palace, the three of them are undoubtedly much lower in the Shenqing Dao League. At this moment, when Palace Master Yue speaks, they naturally dare not refuse to obey. Next moment, the three cultivators in the middle stage of nascent soul spread out. The two members of the Qingwei Dao faction took out two fifth-order mid-grade Taoist instruments, and Jin Yuanjin took out a fifth-order high-grade Taoist instrument. Under the stimulation of mana, the three-level Dao domain was immediately superimposed on this airspace, making the space here extremely stable. See this scene. Chen Daoxian stared at the Palace Master of Yue Palace intently, but he took out a small tower-shaped cave artifact in his hand and said, "You two go in first." Seeing this, Jin Chanying didn't say a word, and directly got into the cave in the small tower. Xiling glanced at Chen Daoxian, opened her mouth slightly, and finally warned, "Be careful." After all, he followed Jin Chanying and entered the cave in the small tower. This time, in the huge Qian immortal mansion, except for Chen Daoxian, everyone fled. Even if the fusion of these two laws reaches 50%, it is not comparable to the top true monarchs who have both reached the high level of the law, and the fusion degree has reached 50%. In the same way, the two laws, the high level of the law and the early stage of the law, have a fusion degree of more than 50%, reaching 60%, and their strength is naturally stronger. Even, there are extremely perverted top true monarchs who not only comprehend two laws. It can be seen that there is a huge gap between the top true monarchs. This is only the gap in the realm of the pure Tao, but also the gap in the two basic cultivations of Qi refinement cultivation base and body refinement cultivation base, as well as the difference in magical tools, secret methods, and magical powers between different monks. These can have a huge impact on the strength of the monks. The Hall Master of Zhenhai Palace was able to become the top powerhouse in the Chenyuan sword sect with his Midyuaning cultivation base, relying more on the advantages in the realm of the Great Tao. Concubine Qinxue, the sect master of Chenyuan sword sect, can become the top-ranked powerhouse in the sect, relying more on the advantages of basic cultivation, secret techniques, and magical instruments. 7017K. Chapter 336. Looking at Palace Master Yue surrounded by the law of fire, Chen Daoxuan's face was extremely solemn. Palace Master Yue is not a sword cultivator, she is following the way of art. But after the realm of the cultivator's avenue reaches the realm of law, there is basically no difference between the way of art, the way of swordsmanship or other paths. The difference between them is more about the level of the Daos realm. Jianxiu is famous among low-level monks, because Jianxiu has set foot on the first level of the Dao realm when he has established a foundation. Compared with low-level monks who take other paths, the advantages are naturally huge, and they are basically invincible at the same level. And in the Zifu period, especially the Jindan period, monks who take other paths will catch up with the Dao realm, especially in the nascent soul period. At this time, whether the cultivator takes the sword way or other paths is no longer the key point. The key point is the level of the Dao state, the number of comprehension laws, and the degree of integration of different laws. This is the case with the Palace Lord Yue in front of him. Although she is walking in the way of art, she has reached the high level of the law, and the power of this fire law alone is not under any sword repair of the same level. Around the Palace Lord Yue, the flames turned into blazing white, fist-sized vermilion birds. The flames of the vermilion birds danced gracefully, supporting the Palace Lord Yue like a flame fairy. Compared with the monstrous water potential that Chen Daoxian carried with the sword just now, the scene of Palace Lord Yu's hand is undoubtedly much smaller. But Chen Daoxian felt a deadly threat on these blazing white flames. Chen Daoxian knew that he must not let the flame vermilion sparrow be stained in the slightest, otherwise the body will be destroyed and the soul will collapse. The Lord of Yuyue Palace looked down at Chen Daoxian, and his red lips lightly opened. Since you have already made a move, try this move from this palace. Phantom is really hot. Palace Lord Yuyue gave a light drink, and the flame vermilion bird that only surrounded her charged towards Chen Daoxian at a terrifying speed faster than the ordinary fifth-order flying sword. This moment, everything between heaven and earth, in Chen Daoxian's eyes, seems to have slowed down. A sense of suffocation came to my mind. Can't stop. Feishua's sword can't stop it. The moment he saw the flame Suzaku rushing towards, this thought occupied Chen Daoxian's mind. Crucial moment. Chen Daoxian couldn't care to keep his hand, and a transparent flying sword flew out from his dantian, which was the Qingying sword in the promotion state. The second law. In the distance, Palace Lord Yuyue saw this scene, and a shocking expression appeared on her pretty face. Sure enough, with the late nascent soul's cultivation of the Nether Moon Palace Master, coupled with the law of fire at the high level of the law realm, it is simply not something that Chen Daoxian's space law can compete with. Although the same level of space law has some advantages in front of the fire law of the Palace Master Yuyue is one level higher than Chen Daoxian's space law. Coupled with her cultivation as high as the late nascent soul, she brought the power of the law of fire to the extreme. It is far from being able to compete with the space law motivated by the mana in the early stage of Chen Daoxian Jindan. Sky. The Suzaku flame broke through the folds of space and spread to the body of the Qingying sword. In less than a breath, the Qingying sword was burned into nothingness by it. This time, in front of Suzaku flame, there was no obstacle, and he rushed straight towards his deity. Seeing this, Chen Daoxian did not dare to keep his hand any longer, and hurriedly mobilized the Liangyi sword formation. With the power of the formation and the blessing of the mind, the laws of space and the laws of water movement are integrated again. The second fusion of the two was many times faster than the original fusion. Almost in an instant, an immortal sword exuding a terrifying slight potential appeared in front of Chen Daoxian. At this time, the Suzaku flame transformed by the real fire of the phantom spirit also rushed in front of Chen Daoxian. He didn't dare to neglect, and immediately controlled the brand new flying sword that fused the two laws, and slashed the flames of Suzaku with one sword. Boom! This time, a violent explosion exploded in the air. The blazing white phantom fire was directly smashed to pieces by this brand new flying sword that fused the two laws. In the immortal city of Jinyuan, shattered into countless flames, falling towards the city. Not good. Jinyuan Jinjuan, who was on the side, saw this scene, and was shocked. Jinyuan Xiancheng is his foundation. Since Chenyuan Jianzong was driven out of Yunhua by Shenqing Dao League, Jinyuan Jinjuan has established a foothold in this Xiancheng. For Jinjuan Jinyuan, this immortal city is not only the logistics base of the Shenqing Dao League, but also an important resource guarantee for his future rebirth, and he must not lose it. Think about this. Jinyuan Jinjuan didn't care about strengthening the airspace, and immediately waved his hand. A net pocket-shaped magic weapon instantly expanded, and took over the flames of the vermilion birds scattered in the city. But, he far underestimated the power of the ghostly real fire of the Palace Master Yuyue. This. Facing Jinjuan Jinyuan's terrified eyes, this fifth-order mid-pocket-shaped magic weapon was directly shattered into phantom fires of blazing white flames, which burned to a great extent. Just 3 breaths. This fifth-order middle-grade magic weapon is in a state of collapse, idiot. When Palace Master Yuyue saw this scene, he was so angry that he was speechless, and had to scold Jinjuan Jinyuan for being stupid. Without using the law, directly let the fifth-order magic weapon fight against the law attack of the same rank monk, which simply does not take the fifth-order magic weapon seriously. You must know that a fifth-order middle-grade magic weapon, even for a top true monarch, is not a piece of garbage that can be discarded at will. But he was so embarrassed by his pig teammates. If it wasn't for Palace Master Yuyue seeing that the situation was not good, and hurriedly withdrawing the real fire of the phantom spirit, this pocket-shaped fifth-order magic weapon would have been destroyed in her hands. Fellow Taoist Jin Yuan, this palace asked you to reinforce this airspace, don't you understand? Looking at Palace Master Yuya's pretty face covered with frost, Jin Yuan knew that the other party was really angry, and he didn't dare to argue. He has also reacted now. Even if he didn't go to put out the fire just now, with the strength of Palace Lord Yuyue, he would easily recover the phantom spirits that were scattered and shattered. Although Jin Yuan's actions were not a disservice, it did make Palace Lord Yuyue lose face in front of Qin Daoxian. After all, his attack destroyed his teammate's magic weapon, which is not a glorious thing. Seeing Jin Yuan's sullen attitude, Palace Master Yuyue snorted coldly, and it's not good to be aggressive. After all, Jin Yuan is a member of the Xianyang sect after all, and is not assigned to her Qingwei Taoism. She scolded the other party, it was already the limit. Besides, at this time of the enemy, Palace Lord Yuyue couldn't care about such trivial matters as Jin Yuan, an ordinary Jinjuan with a near lifespan. She got angry just now, but felt that Jin Yuan's rash action made her a little embarrassed. Calm down now, Palace Lord Yuyue was horrified to find that Qin Daoxian had actually shattered her phantom fire. You must know that her phantom fire is the stunt that she has achieved since she broke through to the nascent soul period. There are as many as the Yuanying Jinjuan who died under her move. But today, Qin Daoxian defeated the phantom spirit real fire she displayed with the high-level fire law of the Law Realm. After defeating Palace Lord Yuyu's illusory skyfire, the Bingxian sword was split into two again, turning into a light blue Fei Shui sword and a transparent Qingying sword. Unexpectedly, you not only comprehended the two laws, but even merged the two laws together. Palace Master Yuyue stopped and looked at Qin Daoxian again. As far as I know, you are not a disciple of Qianyuan sword sect, right? Hearing this, Qin Daoxian frowned. What do you want to say, fellow Taoist? You are not a disciple of Qianyuan sword sect, why do you work so hard for Qianyuan sword sect? Palace Lord Yuyue persuaded, as long as you are willing to join our Xian Qingdao alliance, I hereby promise that the past will never be repeated, how about that? Palace Master Yuyue was completely convinced by Qin Daoxuan's talent, and extended an olive branch to Qin Daoxian again, wanting to recruit him. It's a pity. She didn't know that although Qin Daoxian was not loyal to Qianyuan Jianzong, the Tai Shin Shui he asked for could not be given to him by the Qingwei Daoist sect. The conflict between the two has long been doomed. It was impossible for Qin Daoxian not to Tai Shin Shui, because that was the only hope for his 13th uncle to build a foundation. For the Qingwei Taoist faction, Tai Shin Shui is the hope for the rise of the sect, and it is impossible to give it to an outsider like Qin Daoxian. No matter how good Qin Daoxuan's talent is. Therefore, the contradiction between the two is completely impossible to reconcile. Seeing Qin Daoxuan's firm face, Palace Master Yuyue sighed. Unfortunately, a peerless genius who is expected to become the heavenly lord of tribulation is about to fall into my hands. Qin Daoxian. Ben Gong will remember you. Say it. The aura of Palace Lord Yuyue changed completely. If it is said that the attitude she showed in front of Qin Daoxian before, has always been the arrogance of the strong predecessors. Her current performance is to regard Qin Daoxian as a respectable opponent. I saw that she slowly stretched out Bai Nin's palm, and at the palm, a thin red and golden line jumped in her palm. In the blink of an eye, the thin red thread and the thin golden thread were slowly intertwined, and in the eyes of outsiders, they became indistinguishable from each other. Qin Daoxian, although I don't know how you combine the laws of space and the laws of water movement into one, it is clear that your method of combining them is very crude, or very violent. Palace Lord Yuyue stared at him. Now, this palace will show you what the real fusion of laws looks like. The words fall. In front of Palace Master Yuyue, a golden fire phoenix appeared in front of her. This fire phoenix is not only several times bigger than the Suzaku flame just now, but the key point is that it has a little more spirituality than the Suzaku flame just now. In addition, every feather of this fire phoenix is lifelike, as if the real fire phoenix was resurrected. Of course Qin Daoxian knew that this was not a real fire phoenix. The real fire phoenix, even the one with the lowest strength, is above the true immortal level. It is far from what the nascent soul cultivator, the palace lord Yuyue, can drive. Although it is not a real fire phoenix, this golden fire phoenix also has a bit of the aura of a fire phoenix. Fire phoenix was born with the law of fire. After the palace master Yuyue integrated her golden rule into the fire rule, and then displayed it with the phantom spirit real fire's secret method, she finally had the charm of this flame bird. With the advent of this phoenix, before Chen Daoxian fell, Jinyuan Xianqing was in chaos first. Even if the three middle nascent soul cultivators held Dao domain instruments to suppress the airspace, they could not restrain the power of the fire phoenix from spreading towards Jinyuan Xianqing. True monarch Jin Yuan's face was ashen. He knew that this time, regardless of whether he could take down Chen Daoxian or not, his immortal city would be over. Without Jinyuan Immortal City as a foundation, Jinyuan Jinjuan has no idea whether he will be able to step on the nascent soul cultivation base after he seizes the house in the future. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but feel anxious about Chen Daoxian, and he even felt hatred for the top true monarch of the Qingwei Taoism, Palace Lord Yuyue. Because in his opinion, Palace Lord Yuyue can completely force Chen Daoxian away instead of killing him. Of course, Jinjuan Jin Yuan knew Chen Daoxian's talent. He also knew that if this son didn't kill him, he would become a serious trouble for the Xianqing Taoist alliance in the future. But what does this have to do with him? After all, Jinyuan Zhenjin's lifespan is only a few decades at most. Only in the early stage of Jindan, this undoubtedly greatly dragged him down. After all, for monks, cultivation is the foundation. Without cultivation as the foundation, even if the Daos realm is high, it is difficult to exert its power. Because of the gap in cultivation, it will directly lead to the gap between the quality and quantity of the two methods. Quantitatively, Chen Daoxian has a fourth-rank high-grade fortune-telling white lotus, which may not be afraid of Palace Master Yuyue, but the qualitative gap is not easy to solve. Therefore, the power of the immortal sword formed by the fusion of the laws of emptiness and water is ultimately inferior to that of Palace Master Yuyue. The reason why he can stand here unharmed is because at the last moment, he activated all the mana and activated the Star Kendo map. With the help of the power of Xingqian Kendo map, the Fire Phoenix Yue of the Palace Lord Yuyue was forcibly annihilated. This made it appear to outsiders that Chen Daoxian and Palace Master Yuyue were evenly matched. In fact, in the collision just now, Chen Daoxian lost. Looking at Chen Daoxian, who was gasping for breath, Palace Lord Yuyue continued, "However, even if you can survive under the real fire of my phantom spirit, how many times can you support it?" She looked at Chen Daoxian, raised her right hand again, and suddenly, a fire phoenix, the same as before, whirled around her. "Your mana is too weak, Chen Daoxian, you are sure to lose. Calm down." His good breath, Chen Daoxian raised his head, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. "That's not necessarily true. Hear this." Palace Lord Yuyue suddenly became alert. Although she thought that with Chen Daoxian's mana, the attack of the level just now, the opponent would never be able to use it several times. But Chen Daoxian's performance is really amazing, not like a Jindan cultivator at all, but a top true monarch with relatively weak mana. In the heart of Palace Lord Yuyue, Chen Daoxian was already at the same level as her. Now that the confident smile on the other side's face, how could she not make her feel alert? She did not forget that true monarch Ming Huang, a late nascent soul monk, died at the hands of Chen Daoxian. Just when she thought that Chen Daoxian was going to perform some kind of secret technique, Chen Daoxian took out a cyan spiritual flag directly from the storage ring. "This is..." Palace Master Yuya's eyes narrowed, and the expression on her pretty face was slightly surprised. Suddenly, she remembered the origin of this magic weapon. Michin Banner. Immediately afterwards, Palace Master Yuyue directly used the Dao domain to suppress Chen Daoxian and his surroundings, wanting to solidify this air domain and make Mi Chen Fan lose the ability to teleport in space. Unfortunately, she did it too late. It is difficult to completely solidify a space without the blessing of the Dao domain of the nascent soul cultivator alone. Not to mention that Chen Daoxian still has the Star Sword Dao map in his body. Even if the Yue Palace Master uses the Dao domain magical tool, Chen Daoxian can use the Star Sword Dao map to destroy it in an instant. Too late. Chen Daoxian waved the spirit flag in his hand before he finished speaking. The next moment, his figure instantly disappeared in place. Ah! Seeing this scene, Palace Master Yue was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood, especially after seeing that Jinyuan Immortal City had been completely destroyed and disappeared. The Xianqing Dao League entered a fairy city, and the loss was so great that the culprit slipped away. This made the arrogant Palace Master Yue completely unacceptable. On the side, Jinyuan Jinjuan was so frightened that he didn't dare to come out, for fear of harming Qiyu. Half an hour. When Palace Master Yue calmed down, a true monarch nascent soul from the Qingwei Taoist sect flew up and said, "Palace Master, perhaps your subordinates can give it a try." Hearing this, Palace Lord Yue suddenly thought of something, grabbed the other party's shoulder, and said eagerly, "Try it." Yes. The nascent soul cultivator nodded and pinched the mysterious secret art. Suddenly, where Chen Daoxian was standing, a mass of breath was collected into his palm. The sky and the earth are boundless, the pursuit of thousands of miles. Fast. This nascent soul true monarch had a serious expression. With the casting of this spell called tracking in 10,000 miles, in midair, mysterious spell patterns appeared one after another. In the end, these spell patterns all point in one direction, southeast. Seeing this, Palace Lord Yue was overjoyed. Chase! Yes! The three nascent soul cultivators followed closely and flew toward the southeast. Only the huge pit under their feet proved that a shocking battle broke out here. 100,000 miles away. Southeast of Jinyuan Xiancheng. A space turbulence rippled, and then, a monk holding a blue spirit flag and wearing a blue spirit armor appeared out of thin air. Cough cough cough. As soon as Chen Daoxian showed his figure, he coughed violently. Although he used all means just now, he made a reckless move with Palace Lord Yue. But because the fire phoenix was too close to him, and all his thoughts were focused on the immortal sword that fused the two laws. To use the Star Kendo map, you still need to take back your mind. This action undoubtedly made him use the Xingqian Kendo map a little slower. Just this slight slowdown made him suffer the impact of some residual prestige from the fire phoenix. The impact of Yue, which was less than 1%, made this 4th order high-grade power spirit armor comparable to the 5th order low-grade spirit armor unable to hold up, causing Chen Daoxian to be injured. Chen Daoxian didn't know, he just took a cautious attitude and temporarily blocked his connection with the outside world with a space cage. Because he knows that there are many secret techniques in the Shoshin world, and he can track the trail of the enemy from a distance. Now that his mana is exhausted and his body is still injured, there is nothing wrong with being careful. He plans to use space teleportation to leave here after recovering his mana. But before that, he had one more thing to do. Chen Daoxian immediately took out a small tower, and immediately, two figures flew out of the small tower. It was Jin Chanying, the grandson of Jinjuan Jinyuan, and his concubine, Xiling. Now! The two of them stood in front of Chen Daoxian, and the expressions on their faces were all very restrained. Just now in the small tower, the cave artifact. Jin Chanying and Xiling witnessed the whole process of Chen Daoxian's reckless fight with Palace Lord Yue. Especially Jin Chanying, as a 9th-level cultivator of Jin Dan, in terms of cultivation, he is still above Chen Daoxian. However, in terms of strength, Jin Chanying knew in his heart that this fellow Daoist Chen in front of him might be able to stab him to death with a little finger. However, Xiling did not have a strong concept of the difference between the strength of Jin Dan cultivator and Yuanying cultivator. All she knew was that Chen Daoxian and Palace Master Yue fought recklessly and actually destroyed Jinyuan Xiancheng. You know, her family's residence is also within Jinyuan Xiancheng. Chen Daoxian unexpectedly helped her avenge her great revenge without knowing it. Chapter 338. Chen Daoxian looked coldly at the two with a cautious look, and said, "Although I use space teleportation to escape, the people from the Xianqing Dao League will definitely pursue me. If you follow me, you will only be in danger, so this is the end of our cooperation. Please leave by yourself, heard." Jin Chanying and Xiling looked at each other with a helpless expression. From the bottom of my heart, Xiling may be better, no matter what. She not only avenged her great revenge, but also escaped from the control of Jin Yuanzhenjuan. But Jin Chanying is different. He was signed by Jin Yuanzhen as a blood slave. As long as Jin Yuanzhen does not die, Jin Chanying will not be able to live in peace for a day. But seeing Chen Daoxuan's indifferent gaze, Jin Chanying finally swallowed his pleas. He cupped his hands to Chen Daoxian and said, "In that case, I will leave now, and please take care of fellow Taoists. After all, turn around and leave." Chen Daoxian opened the space cage, and Jin Chanying turned into a flash of light, and disappeared into the sky in a blink of an eye. Seeing this, Ziling also bowed to Chen Daoxian Fuss body, and her red lips lightly opened. "Senior is so kind and virtuous, I can't repay this concubine. I have no time to leave, and I hope my senior will cherish it." Saying that, Ziling gave her another blessing. Chen Daoxuan's terrifying strength in the battle with Palace Master Yu Yue has completely convinced this Sifu fairy who has a mysterious body of 9 yin. Chen Daoxian nodded. Just when Xiling turned to leave, Chen Daoxian suddenly thought of something, raised his hand and said, "Fairy, wait, heard." Ziling's footsteps paused slightly. Lu Mei frowned slightly. She turned around with a slightly puzzled expression, and looked at Chen Daoxian. "What else do you have to order, senior?" Chen Daoxian nodded slightly and said, "Fairy, have you decided where to go?" "This." Hearing this, Ziling hesitated. "Yes." Although Xianyunsu is big, but now she is alone, where should she go? She definitely couldn't stay in the territory of the Xianqing Dao League. It is foreseeable that she and Jin Chanying will definitely be wanted by the Xianqing Dao League. Jin Chanying is okay to say, no matter what. Jin Chanying is also a late Jindan cultivator. If true monarch Yuanying does not take action in person, it may be difficult for ordinary Jindan cultivators to win the opponent. And her strength, although it is considered good in Zifu, any Jindan cultivator can easily take her down. Now that the Xianqing Dao League is in a battle with Chenyuan Zhenzong, it may be difficult to assign nascent soul cultivators to arrest Jin Chanying, but assigning a few Jindan cultivators to arrest her is simply a piece of cake. Even if Zhenjuan Jinyuan doesn't leak the news that she has a mysterious body of Jiuyin, Zhenjuan Jinyuan himself will never let her go. A mere Jin Yuanzhenjuan can force her to be humble for decades, not to mention the Yu Yue Palace Lord, who is 10 times more terrifying than Jin Yuanzhenjuan. Xiling suspected that, with the fiery temper of Palace Lord Yu Yue, if Chen Daoxian was discovered again this time, he would definitely go all out and not give Chen Daoxian a chance to breathe again. Ziling couldn't figure out, how could Chen Daoxian sit here so calmly to recover his mana? Chen Daoxian didn't know what Xiling was thinking. If he knew, he would at most smile. Palace Lord Yu Yue is indeed stronger than Chen Daoxian, but to say that he has no resistance at all is completely nonsense. Chen Daoxuan's ability to forcibly take on the top true monarch, Palace Master Yu Yue, is the proof. If Palace Lord Yu Yue catches up to Chen Daoxian again, he will definitely not fight with the opponent this time, but choose to use teleportation to run away. Xingqian Kendo map opened the way, teleported to escape. In Chen Daoxuan's view, unless it is pursued by a top true monarch who also masters the laws of space, or someone has set up a high-level formation siege in advance. Otherwise, he wants to escape, but it is just a very easy thing. The reason why Palace Lord Yu Yue pursued him so persistently was that he did not see Chen Daoxian taking out the Star Sword Dao map in his Dantian, otherwise he would definitely extinguish his mind of chasing him. Because she knew that she would never be able to kill a top true monarch who ignored the suppression of Dao domain instruments and was proficient in the laws of space. But all this, Xiling is not clear. She only knew that Chen Daoxian was not the opponent of Palace Master Yu Yue, and if he was caught up by the other party, his life and death would be unpredictable. If Chen Daoxian is killed, what else can she do to this little ant attached to the big tree Chen Daoxian? Let's go. Looking at Ziling, who was still stunned, Chen Daoxian grabbed her arm directly with his right hand. The next moment, the figures of the two gradually blurred. When the two of them showed their bodies again, they were already 2,300 miles away. Chen Daoxuan's space teleportation, the farthest distance can only be teleported to within the range of his own consciousness. His current range of divine consciousness is only more than 2,300 miles, so the farthest distance of each teleportation is only that far. Compared with Mi Chenfan's fleeting distance of 100,000 miles, Chen Daoxuan's teleportation is still poor. Not a lot. However, compared with Mi Chenfan, his teleportation has an advantage, that is, it can be used continuously. In the next second, the figures of him and Ziling were blurred again. It teleported a dozen times in a row. Chen Daoxuan's position at this time has long deviated from the trajectory that Palace Lord Yue and others were looking for. Now, he has finally completely escaped the pursuit of Palace Master Yue. Brush! The figures of Chen Daoxian and Ziling appeared again. Chen Daoxian didn't react at all. Ziling, who was pulled by his wrist, bent over and kept retching. Looking at Ziling's embarrassed appearance, Chen Daoxian didn't say anything to blame. He knew in his heart that it was because Ziling's cultivation base and Dao realm were too low to adapt to the dizziness caused by space transmission. After retching for a while, Ziling finally got used to it. She looked at the surrounding scenery, looked up at Chen Daoxian, and asked, "Where are we, herd?" Chen Daoxian shook his head, "I don't know either." He paused for a while, then glanced at Ziling, and said in surprise, "Aren't you a local snake in the Jinyuan Xianqing sphere of influence? Don't you understand this place?" Hearing this, Ziling's pretty face showed a hint of bitterness. "I don't understand, in fact, it's the first time I've gone this far when I'm so old." This time, Chen Daoxian was completely shocked by Ziling's words. A dignified ninth-floor cultivator of the Purple Mansion, who has never traveled beyond the 100,000-mile radius of Jinyuan Xianqing. This is as ridiculous as a late Zifu monk in Sangzhou never leaving Guang'an. Seeing the doubts on Chen Daoxuan's face, Ziling hesitated. "This is your private matter, and I won't force it if you don't want to say it." After all, Chen Daoxian expanded his consciousness and began to carefully investigate the situation here. Seeing Chen Daoxuan's appearance, Ziling let go of her guard instead. She bit her lip and said, "It's okay to tell you, I was found out by my family since I was a child, and I was found out by my family as a special spiritual body like the Jiuyin Xuanzang body. In order to curry favor with Jinyuan Jinjuan, the family treated me like a canary. Captive up. In order to save me, my parents were also secretly killed by Jinyuan Jinjuan and his family. From childhood to adulthood, the farthest distance I left was the city wall of Jinyuan Xianqing." Saying that, Ziling gently unbuttoned her robe, revealing her white shoulders. I saw that there was an ugly blood-colored brand on her white shoulders, and this blood-colored brand was connected to her back. Original blood god forbidden. Seeing the red brand on her shoulder, Chen Daoxian frowned. Chen Jinren recognizes this ban. A blush flashed across Zilinkio's face. Chen Daoxian nodded. Origin blood god's ban is evil and abnormal, and it must be performed by intercepting the blood of the person's close relatives, and it must be banned by a high-level cultivator in person. The prohibition that Jinjuan Jinyuan has placed on you before, is this prohibition, right? Yes. Ziling got dressed and was in a low mood. Original blood divine forbidden is both a protection and a restriction. With the cultivation of Jinyuan Jinjuan, as long as you are close to you, you can accurately sense your location. Hearing this, Ziling's face became even darker. Seeing that Ziling was silent, Chen Daoxian did not say anything to comfort him. The atmosphere between the two was a little dull. About half a cup of tea time. Chen Daoxian looked happy. I found it, heard. Ziling raised her head and looked at him in surprise. Chen Daoxian said to himself, 1 fifth order spiritual vein, 3 Jindan real people are entrenched, not bad, eh? Suddenly, he seemed to have discovered something interesting. It's actually him. What Chen Daoxian discovered on this fifth order spiritual vein was none other than the immortal Yin Jiu who escaped from Zenengwan Xiancheng. That day, true monarch Minghuang died in battle, and immortal Yin Jiu immediately chose to hide his subordinates and run alone, and his actions were not much better than Yi Wudao at the beginning. It's just that immortal Yin Jiu doesn't have Yi Wudao's background, and now he has long been on the wanted list of the Xianqing Dao League. Unexpectedly, immortal Yin Jiu was hiding here with the 2 Jindan loose cultivators. Chen Daoxian is very strange. With the reward offered by the Xianqing Dao League, why didn't the 2 Jindan loose cultivators report each other to the Xianqing Dao League? You must know that harboring wanted criminals in the territory of the Xianqing Dao League is not a minor crime. In terms of dominance over the territory, the Xianqing Dao League is not much weaker than the Chenyuan Sword Sect. Even because the Xianqing Dao League has ruled the territory for a longer time, their rule over the jurisdiction is stronger and more deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. Southeast of Jinyuan Xiancheng. In a fifth-order spiritual vein. Above the spiritual veins, immortal palaces stand. This dojo, named Shuangsheng Peak, was named after 2 Jindan sages standing here. As a high-level cultivator next to true monarch Yuanying, Jindan cultivator can basically walk sideways within the sphere of influence of Jinyuan Xiancheng, as long as he does not offend Jinyuan true monarch and several other top powers. Especially the 2 golden elixir loose cultivators like Shuangshengfeng, who usually only have 1 or 2 golden elixir cultivators, are not willing to provoke them at all. After all, this kind of Jindan cultivator on Shuangsheng Peak belongs to the kind of person who can feed the whole family without hunger, and the Jindan cultivator and the Jindan family should not only consider themselves, but also the family behind them. Therefore, it is impossible to act as unscrupulously as the 2 on Shuangsheng Peak. Now, inside a splendid palace on the Shuangsheng Peak, a beautiful maid and dancing girl is dancing in front of the 3 Jindan cultivators. On the throne of the high platform, 3 Jindan real people are staggering and drinking happily. Brother Yin Vulture, brother, I really feel unworthy for you. Among the 3, a Jindan cultivator wearing a golden Taoist robe with a long beard and a rough face said loudly, brother, you have worked hard for the Xianqing Taoist Alliance for so many years, but only because you lost to the savage cultivators in Wanxinghai. If you attack, I will arrest you. Tsk tisk. Said, the rough-faced Jindan cultivator kept shaking his head. Hearing these words, immortal Yinjia's face also darkened. Obviously, he did not expect that Zhongmin and Daomeng would be so heartless and wanted to arrest him directly, leaving no room for him. In any case, his Yin Vulture real person is also a 9th-level cultivator of Jindan, and he is only 1 step away from the nascent soul stage. When he retreated back then, to a certain extent, he also reserved a strength for the Xianqing Dao League. His identity has also changed from the high-ranking Jindan Jinren of the Qingwei Taoist faction to a wanted criminal of the Xianqing Taoist League. The most direct impact of the change of identity is the acquisition of resources. For any monk, cultivation requires a lot of resources, and the more advanced monks are, the more resources are required for cultivation. In the past, as a disciple of the Qingwei Dao school, immortal Yin Jiu never had any worries about resources. But now, after he was reduced to a loose cultivator, he deeply felt that cultivation was not easy. If it wasn't for these 2 people from Shuangsheng Peak, he wouldn't even have a place to stand. Of course, Master Yin Jiu also knew in his heart that the 2 people from Shuangsheng Peak did not take him out of kindness, but because they saw that it was profitable for him. For the 2 Jindan cultivators in Shuangshengfeng, the greatest benefit of Yinjizhenren is that he knows the resource route of Jinyuan Xiancheng to various immortal cities on the front line, as well as the strength of the monks responsible for escorting. In the realm of the Xianqing Dao League, if you want to rob the materials transported by the Xianqing Dao League, you must have a foolproof strategy. Otherwise, it is not a robbery, but a gift. This simple truth, the two Jindan cultivators of Shuangshengfeng naturally understand, and since they want to rob, they must rob valuable resources. The two Jindan cultivators from Shuangsheng Peak did not know which of the resources that Jinyuan Xianqing transported to the major immortal cities on the front line was the most valuable and which was the least valuable. If they rob a group of resources used by low-level monks, wouldn't they lose a lot? Because things like robbing resources can never be done for a long time. Before the Xianqing Dao Alliance can react, they must run away with one vote and escape from the Xianqing Dao Alliance's realm. The reason why these two Jindan real people are willing to give up the foundation here is to loot a batch of resources and run away. It is completely seen that the Chenyuan sword sect is not doing well this time. As far as they know, the Xianqing Dao League and the Chenyuan sword sect started the war in less than 2 months, and they had already lost 7 immortal cities and killed 11 Yuanying true monarchs. One can imagine how tragic the battle on the front line was. Although their Jinyuan immortal city was at the back, compared with the positions of Xianyang sect and Light Daoist sect, their Shuangsheng Peak also belonged to the front line. Once Chenyuan Jianzong tore through the frontline defense and drove straight in, their Shuangsheng Peak would bear the brunt. As loose cultivators, they have no plans to sacrifice their lives for the Xianqing Dao League. The foundation of Shuangshengfeng seems to be good for the time being, but it is hard to say in the future, and the two of them have to make plans early. Actually, within the scope of Jinyuan Xianqing, the forces floating in people's hearts are definitely not the only two sacred peaks. Like those long-standing immortal clans, they all secretly communicated with the Chenyuan Jianzong, for fear that the Chenyuan Jianzong would take the Chuyan kingdom in the future, and they would extend a slaughtering knife to them. In comparison, the two of them just planned to grab a batch of resources and ran away, which was conscientious enough. Half an hour. The hesitant look on the face of Injiu Jinren gradually became firmer. Okay, I promise you. After this vote, the 3 of us will leave the territory of the Xianqing Dao Alliance together. From then on, I will have nothing to do with Zongmen. After saying these words, Yin Zhizen's expression was complicated. After all, the Qingwei Dao school was also the sect that he had practiced for many years from childhood to adulthood. Just leaving like this, it is impossible to say that there is no reluctance in his heart, but for the sake of his own path, Master Ingzhou still knows how to choose. Heard. The two Jindan real people looked at each other, and a look of surprise flashed in their eyes. Brother Yin Vulture, The two didn't finish speaking. Ahead, 2 escaping lights flew directly into the hall and stood in the center of the hall. What? Seeing the sudden appearance of these 2 figures, the beautiful maids who were dancing exclaimed one after another, and the scene was a little chaotic for a while. See. Chen Daoxian frowned slightly. Certainly. He snorted softly. The next second, the maidservants who were exclaiming, seemed to have pressed the pause button one by one and remained motionless. Divine light. With Chen Daoxuan's current sea of divine light, and if he exerts his soul-fixing divine light, even Jin Danjinren can easily settle down, let alone the group of low-level female cultivators who dance. This group of female cultivators was originally a group of cauldrons and concubines. Chen Daoxian personally shot them, no doubt it was a cannon to hit mosquitoes. Seeing that 2 monks, a man and a woman, suddenly broke into their own fairy palace, the 2 Jindan monks from Shuangsheng Peak stood up and asked, "Who are you and why did you trespass on my brother's dojo?" Who knows, Chen Daoxian didn't seem to hear what the 2 of them were saying, and his eyes skipped the 2 of them, and directly cast them on Inji Jinren. Chen. The moment Injiu real person saw Chen Daoxian, he only felt a cold air rushing directly to the top of his head, and his whole body trembled involuntarily. He had seen Chen Daoxuan's strength, and he had escaped from death once in the opponent's hands. But this time, Inji Jinren felt that he might not have such good luck. After all, there was no second Minghuang Jinjuan here to save him. Seeing that Chen Daoxian ignored them, the 2 Jindan cultivators of Shuangsheng Peak felt that there was an evil fire in their hearts for a while. But Chen Daoxian is a Jindan cultivator after all. Without a conflict of interest, the 2 of them do not want to rush into conflict. especially at a critical time when they are preparing for big things. But when the rough-faced Jindan cultivator saw Xiling beside Chen Daoxian, his breathing suddenly became rapid. He quickly transmitted a voice to his tall and thin companion and said, "Senior brother, look at this woman." Hearing this, the tall and thin cultivator stared intently, his complexion suddenly changed, he looked at the rough cultivator and said, "The body of Jiuyin Xuanzang." The two looked at each other, and the color of greed suddenly accumulated in their eyes. If the ordinary cauldron is only comparable to the spiritual pill, then the female cultivator with the body of Jiuyin profound concubine can become the cauldron, and the Jindan cultivator can even break through to the nascent soul stage, which shows the preciousness of this kind of spiritual body. True monarch Jin Yuan abolished so much to imprison Xiling. Naturally, it was not just because of Xiling's beauty. For Zhenjuan Jin Yuan, what kind of beauty he has never seen before, how could he put so much effort into a mere woman, only to improve his cultivation and increase his lifespan are his real pursuits. Although the two of Shuangsheng Peak's cultivation base is not as good as Jinyuan Zhenjuan, but their mentality is almost the same as each other. Cultivation and strength are the most important things for monks. Think of this. The two looked at each other, and after making up their minds, they suddenly burst out. "Do not want." On the side, Yinjiu Zhenren was shocked when he saw that the two directly shot at Chen Daoxian. The two of them didn't know Chen Daoxian, but Yinji Zhenren could. It's a pity that the reminder of Yinji Zhenren was still too late, and I saw two sword lights, which directly penetrated the bodies of the two Jindan cultivators at an unbelievable speed. The two of them lowered their heads in a daze, and glanced at the big gap in their dantian. Immediately afterwards, their bodies completely collapsed and dissipated, turning into nothingness. Using the power of the law to attack the flesh body that can't even reach the realm of blood is no different from smashing porcelain with a hammer. Broken when touched. Immortal Yinjiu saw that the two monks of the same rank who had just been drinking and bragging with him were instantly annihilated, his knees softened, and he knelt down in front of Chen Daoxian with a thud. "Senior, spare your life." Saying that, he directly kowtowed to Chen Daoxian. The Qingwei Taoist sect is located. Above the Tai Immortal Pond, a dozen figures were hidden by the hazy mist, which was vaguely invisible. A hint of resentment flashed in the feminine man's eyes. "In the future, this seat will break through the sea of million stars, and we must clear these grasses, heard." The elder surnamed he lowered his head and did not dare to answer. "I remember correctly, so Chen Daoxian is a Zhangzhou cultivator, right?" "It's the Zhangzhou cultivator." The sect master of the Qingwei Taoist sect nodded. "Find a way to make the Jiang family move." However, with the character of the old fox of the Jiang family, he may not dare to take this risk. Hearing this, sect master Yinru looked at elder He and said with a mysterious smile, "Isn't his Jiang family short of money? This subordinates will do it." "Say it." The elder surnamed He disappeared instantly. Obviously, this is also a true monarch nascent soul who has comprehended the laws of space. Shuangsheng Peak Asgard. Chen Daoxian looked at the real Yin vulture who was kowtowing like garlic in front of him, and was quite speechless. He couldn't figure it out. The other party was also a late Jindan cultivator. How could he have no bottom line to this extent? Think of this. Chen Daoxian said indifferently, "Get up." "Ah." Hearing this, the real Yinjiu stood up tremblingly. Chen Daoxian looked at the quail-like real person in front of him, and asked with great interest, "When the Jinan Pass was broken, I asked your subordinates, before you received the news of the defeat of Minghuang Zhenjuan, ran away early. So, how do you judge that true monarch Minghuang will definitely lose to me?" Hearing this, Yinjiu's eyes flickered uncertainly. "You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.